fascinating. They had these guys out there before doing the softball.
Yeah.
What these guys were hitting fucking like 550 feet all I'd ever seen. Like they were launching rockets.
Softball's hard to get that much.
Right. Of course, these guys were all like 6'5", 280, built like this. Thank you, thank you.
So the juice I got was like, just never from
That's always
Now you got a reason. So now you got an excuse if they come up to you. Get away, Satan.
Wholesale and the Association of Pharmacists, those kind of people. What you see going on there and how they can become involved if they choose to be. So you should reach out to them.
My battery goes out.
That's it. That's easy. Good morning.
You should reach out to those people and say, this is what's going on. This
You
may
gotta work
have some
with
impact
that.
on
There's gonna be
not
something.
what you do, but what we all do every day. If you ever get that all do out of your mind and start worrying about Bill or Joey or Gene, you can't do it. But take care.
What is it?
I don't know enough about what's going on. See, I'm uninformed about that. So based on that, I need some guidance or some, at least some feedback. Is, hey, this is going on. This is what you ought to do. I think every pharmacist in North Carolina who's impacted.
You may have methotrexate tablets on your shelf.
I do.
That's a hazardous drug. According to this proposed chapter, it will have to be stored in a negative pressure environment.
That's ridiculous.
Well,
Nobody knows that.
that's the way the chapter's written.
Joey don't know that. I don't know that. Jay don't know.
And handled as a hazardous drug.
Really? I've been prescribing stuff for 40 years.
Yeah. Any uncoated tablet
Uncoated.
that's on the NIOSH list, of a drug that's on the NIOSH list has to have special handling stored.
Now, wait a minute. Coated and uncoated, that's a real general term. Film coated, there's all kinds of coating.
I know. That's why comments were necessary.
Penicillin.
No, right. Penicillin, strangely enough, not on the NIOSH list.
There you go. Send it.
Trilostane is not on the NIOSH list. It's not. It's
Well, that's a serious.
that's gonna be my job, is trying to,
Your job is
if
to.
I could do anything. that's what we can do. The NIOSH list is not what we would use to say this thing.
No. If that be the case, I know exactly how it is.
The biggest man gets that way.
Or the biggest attitude,
gonna
or the
be here?
biggest pompous
Much as far as-
presentation. Right. These people making these rules, they don't have to live with this stuff every day.
Well,
Nobody's got a place to store methotrexate in a negative pressure environment. I guess that's not a robotic cell, is it?
or you can't put them in a.
I wasn't aware of all that stuff. See, you've already told me things I had no idea.
Here he is.
So,
Welcome to the house.
You should have
Excited to be here.
a position where you can disseminate not necessarily your.
Good morning, Mr. Marks. How are you?
You'll be here as far as I know. I haven't heard anything to
Good.
the contrary.
That's good.
Contrary and Parker don't even go in the same system.
Do what?
Contrary and Parker don't
That's
belong in the same
He's
system.
the least contrary person I
He's absolutely the least contrary person. No, he and Clint. I don't know which one is the least contrary.
You don't know me very well.
So you're contrary. In fact, if you take time to share with me some of those bullet points, some of those issues that you consider critical, and some references to that, I can certainly get people in a position to make some comment. Written or even at a meeting or both or what.
written comments submitted to the USP expert committee on
USP
topic.
expert.
Well, that's the name.
Yeah, that's the
also was not part of the drafting of this original language, but I did ask to be on the subcommittee going forward when we were reviewing this stuff.
Dr. Chester. How are you, man? It's like I needed something else. Please do a handshake. Huh? Good morning. Like I needed something to do. You need something to do. We all need something to do. Keep you young.
Oh, man.
Yeah, right.
It was one of the best movies.
I was like the Unbelievable.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
One of those 18 or 20-year-olds did, didn't he?
They were gone 2 or 3 years. We think we have a hard time.
Parker, did you get to do that online ethics?
I haven't finished.
Okay, just let me know. I'm gonna
I will, have it to you tomorrow.
work. I'm headed to.
You going to carry it with tomorrow?
Yeah, if you'll email it to me.
Scan it.
Scan it, send it to me, because I'm going over to Raleigh for a meeting in Orson.
You all renewed the insurance,
Pretty late to me.
Blue Cross Blue Shield?
Changed from the schedule I got then.
Well,
Okay.
then maybe it's me. You could always.
There's not any major on any as far as I know, but check in with Rhonda.
Sure, Rhonda?
Yeah.
Okay.
Joey. What's up, boss?
Did you ask me a little note of mine I sent there? I said, but I would have had this in 5 weeks ago.
You got bad information?
My leader told me that I need to do a check.
Oh, I've already fallen on sword. They know.
Don't put me in
They know who's.
Very good. I got a story.
Jay, I was gonna finish last night. Got something that was
Solved this week.
No, it's no sweat. You send it to me tomorrow morning.
How do you get them to install?
I got a meeting at the nursing
I
home.
was told when I went, I was one per week.
There after that.
So, next week, when you take
That's
two
what's
break.
And I'm sorry, it was a fire drill. It was my fault. I had Dave cost us. I told Gina, I called over to the ethics commission, trying to sue her. To see if she would come in September or October to our retreat to do. I said, I think we're due at the end of September. I said, could you come out and retreat? And she said, well, we have to. And she looked and said, actually, we're already due.
Who does? No, he doesn't. He could.
Joey, one thing on this, do the minutes of the June 14 meeting first. After the ethics thing, do the minutes and then the amendments, because we're not having a public hearing on the amendments. That was last night.
No, he
Okay,
couldn't.
I'll bring attention to that now.
I was kind of dead right there.
And then they had to do that external abrasion, and then after that, it has time to settle down. You know, we do the drawing again. He's got a full schedule for the rest of the summer.
Are you a whiz? I can't. Where's my thing? I'm not a whiz here.
Over here.
I don't even know what I did. I don't even know. There you go. That's looking.
No, that's that one, that one.
Okay. It's looking different anyway.
Let me get
Tom.
Tom. Can you get Tom for me? Y'all
Thank
ready?
you.
Gene? Gene,
I don't.
you ready? Bill?
Amy does not.
Yes, sir. Y'all ready to go?
Born ready.
I know that.
Probably hadn't been this close to you for that long.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes,
You
sir.
ready?
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 898th meeting of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. We appreciate y'all being here today. We're passing around a clipboard if you'll please sign in. And we'll go ahead and get started with the meeting. Our first order of business is to read our ethics statements. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearance of conflict. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board today?
Mr. President, I have a conflict with one of the agenda items.
Okay.
Where Excella Pharma is mentioned, and it's 503B status. I don't remember the exact agenda
Okay.
item.
All right, when we get to that, if you'll just take a seat in the audience and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
And I will point out, Mr. President, for the record, that Mr. Mixon did provide a written notice of that as well.
All right.
So
Thank you,
we're
Mr. Campbell.
All covered.
All right.
And
We'll go-
appreciate that.
We'll go and get the meeting started.
So, Mr. President, what I would suggest is I would, if it would please the board, to start with consideration of the minutes of the June 2014 meeting, and go ahead and do that first, and then we can move to the amendments concerning vaccine administration. Since we're not having a public hearing on that this morning, we had it last night.
Okay.
So I would go ahead and do the minutes.
May I get a motion on the June meeting minutes, please?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Mr. Campbell, next order of business, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, the General Assembly passed and the governor signed into law last year, State Law 2013-246, which expanded the ability of pharmacists to administer vaccines significantly. As part of that process, there was a need to go back through the Rule 2507, which is our rule. There's a direct analog in the medical practice, the medical board's rules governing pharmacist administration of vaccines. There was a need to go through and make sure that that rule matched up with the new statute. And so pursuant to this board's decision at the March 2014 meeting, we published on March 18th, 2014, proposed amendments to the rules governing the administration of vaccines by pharmacists. The entire purpose of the publication of those amendments was to conform the rules with the current statute. And as you all have seen, largely what that involved was eliminating language in the rule, because many things are covered in the statute now. The notice and comment period opened immediately on March 18th, 2014. I can report to the board that staff received only one written comment concerning the rule, and you have that behind your tab, and I am scrambling to pull it out of my materials here as well. I apologize, bear with me for 1 second. I'll just go to it on the link here. We have an April 4th, 2014 electronic mail message from Thomas Quinis, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing Dr. Quinis' name. He is a family physician with Oxford Family Physicians in Oxford, North Carolina, and Dr. Quinis' comment was that immunizing pharmacists should be responsible for reporting adverse reactions to VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, as well as notifying the primary care physician. Dr. Quinis' comment does not speak to anything that's in the rule itself, and he does appear to be asking for an additional responsibility to be placed in the rule that the statute does not require. So he may or may not have a good policy point. I don't have an intelligent opinion on that, or some would say much of anything else, but the staff does not view this as a reason to hold the rule. There was a public hearing scheduled and noticed last night, and I'm sure all of you received the email. We did send the reminder emails throughout. 3 members of the public attended the meeting last night. Anna Armstrong and Weta Gatton from Kroger Pharmacies and Chris Henderson from Costco Pharmacies. Each of them voiced their support for the rule as written, did not feel the need to make any further elaboration on that. So the public hearing was then closed. That was the entirety of the comments received. And so the amendments are now ripe for your action. And that action could include voting to accept the amendments and forward them to the Rules Review Commission, voting to modify the proposed amendment in some way, or voting to reject the amendments. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Anyone have any questions about the amended rules for Jay?
I have a question.
Sure.
I think the comment Dr. Quinis, how'd you pronounce it?
I don't know.
The physician made about reporting to the adverse event reporting system is valid and should be incorporated into at least our protocol, if not the rule. What's the easiest way to make that happen?
If there was a desire to change the rule further, we would, this board would vote to re-amend the rule. Clint and I would change the language to reflect that requirement. We would then open negotiations with the Med Board to make sure they were in agreement with this. They are scheduled this week to consider the same amendments. We'd enter into negotiations with the Medical Board on that. And then we'd have to decide whether we had to republish the rule or not, and I think we probably would republish it for another 90 days
So
of
it's
notice and comment.
pretty cumbersome at this point.
It would be, but if it's an important, if the will of the board is that that's an important enough issue to do that, then that's the process, and that's what we can do.
Well, Board Member Minton has been more involved with this. What's your feeling on the VAERS reporting?
I think that it's a valid consideration. I think possibly down the road, it might be something we might want to consider adding at some other point in time. I think at the present time, and I was going to ask Mr. Campbell if he'd give us the 5-cent windshield tour of the changes and why they're there in the rule. And I think it would be in our best interest today, based on where it is now, to approve the amendment as presented. Gives us his analysis of that briefly, and then consider that. I think it's a great substantive thing down the road we could do. Probably best to be fleshed out prior to us taking action on it with the med board to make sure they had no problem, and the board, the people I dealt with, you know, there's been a lot of time and effort put on this thing, and very carefully we want to make sure we craft any changes like that. It's a great point, but at this time, Jay, I would ask you, just as I asked you earlier, just to kind of give us a wherefore and why for we're doing this stuff. And
Yeah, if you look at the text of the amendments, mostly what you see are line through language, and there are two reasons at least for that. Number one is most of the language that has been lined through is, or to the extent they are requirements, we've eliminated from the rule requirements that are present in the statute. As a matter of good policy, and indeed as we're directed by the Administrative Procedures Act, you shouldn't write rules that repeat what's already in a statute. It's not for the least of reasons, it often can be a source of confusion and inadvertent conflict. So a lot of the elimination in here takes into account what the statute now requires specifically. Second, there are some definitions that were eliminated in the course of negotiating these changes with the staff at the medical board. There were certain of the definitions that, for lack of a better phrase, did not do any lifting. There would be a definition of a term, and then that term was never used again in the rule. So very little reason to define a term that you don't ever use again. So those had been eliminated. There was also a cleanup in the rule, again to deal with the statutory requirements. I will point to Mr. Mixon's point specifically on page 5, subparagraph G, as in George 3, speaks to the reporting the adverse events either to the prescriber or the patient's primary care provider, and that was a statutory requirement, and so that's why the specific reference is made to the two provisions in the statute. So that's the nickel tour, for lack of a better word. It's a harmonizing piece. With respect to the VAERS thing, there's not been any indication to me from the medical board staff that they intend to hold up the amendments pursuant to that suggestion. I mean, I can't control them. They could decide to do that, but I don't think that's likely. Certainly it is something we could discuss going forward as to whether that would be a protocol requirement or the like, but that would be our choice. Either go ahead and vote now to make that change, and then we'll reopen the process, which we could do, or you can pass it as is. All indications are the medical board is going to pass the same rules as is, and we could open that up down the road. Your pleasure on that.
Just one more comment. I really think that as a course of doing your job properly, if you had an adverse event with this or any other medication that you dispense, then you would have I think, an ethical responsibility report anyway. So I really, based on that, if we're doing our job properly, we're going to do that. So based on that and based on Jay's representation that there's no substantive change to the rule, it's just a clarification and cleaning up, I move at this point in time that we approve that amendment as presented and move forward.
I second that.
That motion made?
Yes, sir.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Campbell, you'll proceed that to.
Very good. That's what we'll
rule
do.
review.
We'll certainly advise you if there are any unexpected developments with the medical board. This is the weird rulemaking we have to proceed in parallel. with the medical board, and so we'll let you know if anything happens with that. Very good, Mr. President. Next item on the agenda, we have a request for a modification of a reinstatement order from pharmacist Brian Mazingo, and I think Cindy's here. There's Brian. Come on up, Brian. And if you could indulge me for 1 minute, Mr. President, just to be sure to have the right folder open here.
You do promise me after all those other meetings I had to go to, we won't have to start out again with the backstation stuff, right?
I've got enough people probing this board. That's the last thing that I need want to get into. I think every orifice that can be probed is. Leave those for another day. With that, then, thank you for your indulgence for a moment, Mr. President. Brian Mazingo sitting at the table there, and he is, of course, accompanied by Cindy Clark from NCPRN. I have met with Brian about his request, and so I think he's familiar with what the process is going to be, and I'll just talk back through that very briefly. Brian, I'm going to give an introduction to the board of what your request is and the background of that. We'll ask you a few questions. It is your request to the board, so you'll have an opportunity to say anything you wish to say and present anything you wish to present. So I'll ask a few questions. I'll probably ask a few questions of Cindy as well. Board members may have questions for you. And when they're done, then anything that didn't get asked that you wish to say, anything you want to clarify, anything at all, certainly your opportunity to do that. I think before we start, Cindy, you want to go ahead and swear both of them in. And Cindy will go ahead and ask you both to swear or affirm, and then we'll get started. Board members, the background on Dr. Mazingo is on May 18th, 2010, the board issued an order regarding Dr. Mazingo's eligibility for licensure. You do have a copy of that order, Brian. I know you're familiar with that order. It's behind your tab. And that order declared Dr. Mazingo eligible to continue with the licensure process. At the time, he had just completed pharmacy school. Should back up and say that order stemmed from some findings of substance abuse while Dr. Mazingo was a student. The order did declare Dr. Mazingo eligible to continue with the licensure process and place certain conditions on his license should he obtain one. One of those conditions was that he successfully complete his NCPRN treatment and monitoring contract, and that he not act as a pharmacist manager for a period of 1 year from the date of licensure. In April 2011, NCPRN notified the board staff that Dr. Mazingo was not in compliance with his NCPRN treatment and monitoring obligations, and those are spelled out in a September 20th, 2011 order. They included referrals to NCPRN's compliance committee for material repeated noncompliance with testing and documentation and continuing care obligations. On September 20th of 2011, this board ratified a consent order of discipline against Dr. Mazingo reached during a pre-hearing conference. That consent order included an indefinite suspension of license that was stayed indefinitely pending a 5-day active suspension in compliance with other conditions, including specifically that Dr. Mazingo was not to serve as a pharmacist manager of any pharmacy. Again, a copy of that order is behind your tab on your website. Dr. Mazingo is here today. He is requesting that the board lift the restriction on his acting as a pharmacist manager. So that is the background. That is the request. And with the board's indulgence, I'd like to ask Dr. Mazingo a few questions. Brian, if you would state your name for the record.
David Brian Mazingo.
And is it correct, do you mind if I call you Brian in the hearing? And you're free to say no, call me Dr. Mazingo, and I'll be happy to do that. Brian, the background I gave was would you agree in substance that that is the correct background of leading up to your?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it correct, well, let me ask you because it's your request. At the time, leading up to the order that the board ratified in September of 2011 concerning providing indefinite suspension state and the specific unlimited restriction on your being a pharmacist manager, temporarily unlimited, could you describe for the board, and I know it's in the order, but it'd be good to hear from and Cindy, I'll ask you about this too, describe what led up to that. I may ask you some specific questions about that, and then what I'd like to do is turn from since September of 2011. What's different? Why should the board accept that you could be entrusted to be the person responsible for pharmacy's compliance with all laws and regulations?
The majority of what happened prior to September 2011 was due to me being non-compliant with the PRN contract for mainly sending payments in late, sending a monthly report in a few days after it was due. I had one dilute urine joe screen. That was my very first urine joe screen that I ever did in the program. And it was, I attribute it to just being the first one ever, being nervous because I was at the water fountain drinking water. That's pretty much what led up to September 2011.
But it's correct, wasn't it, that leading up to that point, you had been referred to NCPRN's compliance committee 3 times. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And it had been, while there may be individual explanations, and I'm sure you would give them for each of the non-compliance, you would agree when there was repeated non-compliance.
Yes, sir. I own up to being non-compliant at the time, and I take full responsibility for.
And I think at that time, Dr. Mazingo, you described some of that, or you described some of that non-compliance being due to organizational difficulties and the like. Could you talk about that for the board?
My life at the time was a mess. It was personal life, and mainly personal life. I was pretty much, my work life, I didn't really have many problems. I was always on time for work, never late. I was mainly at home. I was paying bills late every month. My house was a mess. I was showing up to family functions late. People were having to wait on me. At the time, I didn't realize it was as bad as it was until I look back on it now. And of course, what happened in September 2011 really put a big flashlight on it and showed me that I had a problem.
What is your understanding, Brian, of what the responsibilities of a pharmacist manager are?
I think some of the main responsibilities of the pharmacist manager is to keep control of the inventory, especially the controlled substances, make sure that the counts are accurate and counted on a regular basis, basically being compliant with the insurance companies as far as sending in reports that they ask for as far as like Medicare audits and things like that. Just making sure that you're running a good pharmacy, being responsible for the employees in the pharmacy, both the technicians and the other pharmacists that you work with. Making sure it's safe, making sure you have enough help, doing whatever you can to try to prevent errors from occurring, and just sending things in, of course, when they're supposed to be sent in.
Would you agree that the pharmacist manager's responsibility is for the overall compliance of the pharmacy practice at that site with all laws and regulations?
Yes, sir. I think if the pharmacy falls into non-compliance with any of the laws and regulations of the Board of Pharmacy or the DEA, the responsibility does fall on the pharmacist manager.
And would you agree that those responsibilities require a great deal of attention to detail?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that they require a great deal of organization?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that it requires a great deal of planning, advanced planning, that sort of stuff? So in light of the things that you've talked about, candidly, and we appreciate that led up to the September 2011 order,
You described the sort of disorganization in your personal life. Why at this point should the board entrust you to be placed in a position like pharmacist manager, in which sort of organization, detail, et cetera, is very much the order of the day? What changes have occurred or have been made?
I think there's three major reasons why I would make a good pharmacy manager, why you can trust on me to run a good pharmacy. First thing is, I feel like I'm definitely more organized, more mature than I was 3 years ago when I came into this room. I started seeing a therapist every other week for a period of probably 2 years or more. I have a letter of recommendation from him that has the dates that I saw him. And we really tackled my organization. My other, I have a psychiatrist that I see once every 3 months, maybe 4 times a year. He actually diagnosed me with having ADD, attention deficit disorder, the inattention type, and put me on the medication, Strattera, 80 milligrams once every morning, which I've been taking for a long time now, probably 2 years. And it's made a world of difference. I've been, compliant with PRN. I haven't really messed up. I think I might have missed a drug screen one time, but I went the next day to the urgent care and got a drug screen immediately. I think that might be the only time that I've fallen out of compliance with PRN. I'm doing everything on time now. My bills are getting paid. I use Mint.com to manage all my finances. More organized. I take advantage of technology, things like Evernote, which is an app that I have on my phone that syncs with my computer at home. I make lists of things I need to do, things I need to take care of in the pharmacy, and I prioritize it. And I actually have alarms that I use in Google Calendar, which syncs with everything I have, and it reminds me, okay, you need to do this by this time. This is due at this time. It's helped me run a really good pharmacy. I feel like pharmacy is more organized. I've actually taken our Schedule 2 narcotic book that we use to put all the counts for everything, and I've organized it, put it in alphabetical order, and made it a whole lot neater than it used to be. I've done several things in the pharmacy. My second reason actually is a lot of the things that my current pharmacy manager does, she's actually allowed me to do as well. She's kind of delegated some tasks to me. Things like just keeping up with the inventory, making sure we don't over order items, some customer service things. Keeping up, I've organized our controlled, we have a box where we keep all our controlled substance files, like our 222 forms and invoices, and she let me organize that and make it real neat, and take last year's and do the same thing. So I'm already doing some of the things that she does. She's actually a new pharmacy manager. This was her first time being pharmacy manager, so when she was doing the training, a lot of times I was looking over her shoulder, asking her, what are you looking at now? Can you explain, this to me or that to me? Third reason is I feel like I have a lot of support. I have the support of PRN. I have the support of my current pharmacy supervisor, who is actually here, my district supervisor, Miss Betsy Ramsey. All my staff, several of my customers, they all feel like I could do a good job. I've been offered the pharmacy manager position 6 times now, and I feel like I'm just a completely different person. So I guess in summary, my 3 reasons are I'm more organized. already am doing a lot of the things that the pharmacy manager currently does, and I'm doing them right. And lastly, I have a lot of support from everybody around me, family, friends, customers, technicians, everybody.
If I could ask you, Brian, so it's been not quite, but almost 3 years since the September 20th, 2011 board. Have you been continuously employed as a pharmacist in that 3 years?
Yes, sir.
Have you been continuously employed in the same pharmacy, or how many pharmacies have you worked at?
This is my second pharmacy. I've worked there since September
Of last year?
of last year.
Okay. And have you been discharged from any position as a pharmacist in the past 3 years?
No, sir. And actually, my current position, I was actually recruited. The district supervisor actually came to my pharmacy where I was at and told me about the things she heard about me and asked me to join forces and move across the road with her.
So you have joined forces and made an alliance. Have you been reprimanded, warned, or had any sort of adverse action taken against you by your employers in the 3 years for some alleged or actual failure to do the things that your job requires you to do?
No, sir. I've always showed up on time. Haven't had any behavior issues. Everything's good.
I don't have any further questions for Dr. Mazingo. I do have a couple for Cindy, but certainly if you guys have questions for Dr. Mazingo now, or you could certainly hold them until after Cindy talks.
I have a question. Where are you employed?
I currently work at CVS in Lumberton, right off of exit 20 off of 95.
And do you have a copy of the letter of recommendation that you mentioned to?
I sent one to Dr. Campbell, but I don't have one on me.
I don't. Oh, it's in the file. I'm sorry. My boss is telling me it's in the file. I don't have any reason to. I was going to say that I certainly don't have any reason to dispute anything that Brian is saying. I will stipulate for the record that that he is accurate in his description of his workplace performance and the expectations that have been placed upon him. But I will. Let me get the letter.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No. That's not putting me on the spot. I should have been prepared for that, and I apologize.
And I guess I feel like I have more of a competitive attitude as far as making the pharmacy better. Like I don't want to go in and keep the pharmacy where I'm at the way it is right now. I want it to be better than it is right now, and I just want to have good service, get new customers. You know, I have that aspiration. I'm just.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board members?
While Cindy's looking for that, if it's okay with you guys, I'll go ahead and I do have a few questions for Cindy. Cindy Clark. Here it is, Cindy. Yeah, okay. We do have it. We'll hand it up without objection. Cindy, of course, I will disclose to the board, I also met with Cindy Clark, as is my practice before we have these requests to meet with PRN and meet with the person making the request to get a more in-depth understanding of the background and the request. Cindy, of course, we had our meeting. You've heard Brian's testimony today. I guess the nub of the issue, of course, really comes down to is that the organizational planning difficulties that Brian exhibited in 2011 in the early going of his NCPRN treatment and monitoring manifested in non-compliance. And you know, if I were sitting on the board, my question would be, why now? Given the very detail-intensive, high responsibility, organizationally difficult, sometimes requirement of being a pharmacist manager. You've heard Brian talk about the changes he's made, and by the way, Brian, I will state for the record, it's the person where somebody says, I've got 3 points, and here they are. That's the first thing they teach you in law school in appellate arguments, too. But Cindy, if you would talk about, you've heard his testimony, talk about his course of treatment. What's different today in July of 2014 than was true in the spring and fall of 2011?
Sure. So Brian entered the program in the fall of 2009, and I think he really struggled with coming into the program and all of the responsibilities that are put on him, the calling in, the going to meetings, participation in therapy. And I think that he was sober, but I wouldn't necessarily say that he's in recovery at that point. Part of recovery is being accountable, taking responsibility, owning up to things. And I think Brian was just kind of going through the motions at that point, and that's how it showed, is through some of his behaviors, that he wasn't completely in full recovery. As he said, most of the noncompliance, a lot of it had to do with not turning in his fees on time, not turning in his reports on time, forgetting to call in, all behavioral organizational issues. So as a result of the referral to the board, as he said, I think it really did shine a very bright flashlight on the issue and that things needed to change. He was meeting at one point with 2 therapists at one time, and one of the main focuses of their therapy sessions was organization and coming up with tools to address the ADD. As he said, he is on medication to help with that, but he's also learned a lot of behavioral skills that have helped him address those issues. In my conversations with Brian, he's talked to me similarly to what he said to you guys, is, you know, he goes online and reads research articles about ADD and new things coming out and technology that can help him and implement ways so that he can make sure that he stays on time and turns in his reports. He gets really excited about it. He loves the research aspect of it and trying to improve his life. There have been a couple of blips of noncompliance. There wasn't anything in 2011 after the board meeting in September. In November of 2012, he paid his monthly fee late once. And in 2013, he had one missed call, and he disclosed he had a missed test, but he did test the next day, and he hasn't had anything this year. So in almost 3 years, he's had 3 issues of noncompliance, which is not necessarily that uncommon for somebody in the program. I wouldn't say that that's indicative of an issue going on.
No, that's my question. What is any of that sporadic noncompliance, in your opinion, as his case manager, indicative of relapse type behavior?
I don't see a pattern or anything clinical to be concerned about.
And how would you describe the compliance history post 2011 versus pre 2011?
It is a dramatic change in a positive direction. The noncompliance to me is typical of somebody in the program. It's nowhere near what it used to be.
So it's clear on the record, is it your opinion as Brian's case manager at NCPRN that he is capable at this state in his recovery, and given the support networks he has, is he capable of assuming a position like pharmacist manager with the responsibility and organization requirements that entail, and doing so in a reasonably safe manner?
I believe so.
I don't have any further questions for Ms. Clark.
Board members, for Ms. Clark or Mr. Mazingo? Motion on the table, or you want to call for a closed session?
At this time, I'm prepared to move that we grant this request.
And motion is made. Do I have a
I'll
second?
second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Mizzou, that part of your license has been lifted. A lot more comes with the title than pharmacist in charge, so if you'll continue what you're doing now, you'll be very successful at it. We wish you the best.
Thank you.
Brian, congratulations and best of luck going forward. I will prepare an order that will indicate that this condition has been lifted. I will send a copy to you. I will send a copy to Cindy, so they'll have that on file, and wish you the best going forward. Thanks, Brian.
Brian, feel free to stay around for lunch.
I know most people are dying to
It's hardly lunchtime,
get out of
but
here after that.
are you familiar with Dr. Daniel Almond's research?
No, sir.
AMEN? You might want to look into that. He researches a lot of natural therapies for ADD, ADHD, depression, that
How do you
kind
spell
of
his last name?
thing. AMEN.
Mr. Campbell?
Next item on the agenda, we have another request for modification of reinstatement order. This one from Ryan Mills, license number 19259. Where's Ryan? Hey, Ryan, come on up. Well, I guess they're waiting to clear out. But I did not get a chance to meet with Ryan before this, but that's not because, Ryan, that's no comment on you. It's just, in staff's view, this is a relatively, or may I say it's completely straightforward manner, so. But you heard the process here, and you've been through it once before, so I'll do the same thing. I'm just gonna introduce the board, what your request is and why, and give you a chance to say why you're making that request. I may have a question or two for you, and then the board members may as well, and I'll have a question or two for Cindy. Anyway. And Ms. Perrin will ask you to swear or affirm. And I should point out for the record, and should have done that for Dr. Mazinga's request as well, just that, so it's on the record that the board members have had your orders provided to them well in advance of the meeting and had an opportunity to review them, so they are in the record. Dr. Mills comes to us after having received on March 15, 2011, an order reinstating his license with conditions. That order is provided behind your tab, and again, as I've said, the board members have had an opportunity to review that. That order did stem from Dr. Mills's substance abuse issue. The facts leading to that are outlined. It was a period of early, I think, difficulty with treatment, and then a very successful period of treatment that led to his reinstatement with conditions. One of the conditions on Dr. Mills' order is that he not act as a preceptor of pharmacy students. That is condition number 5. Dr. Mills has requested that restriction be lifted, and that is the sole request before you today. So, Ryan, if you would just tell the board, well, first state your name for the record, so we got on there.
My name is Ryan Scott Mills.
And Cindy's waving at me.
Be sworn in.
Didn't Cindy just swear? You just swear in?
Okay, pregnancy brain.
I would not have said that.
It's okay for me to say.
Ryan, if you would tell the board what's brought you here today, and point out it's been 3+ years since your order of reinstatement. Tell them why you believe that or would like to have a preceptor restriction lifted from your license.
Okay. Well, I lost my license December 21st, 2009, and that didn't get reinstated till March 16, 2011. And since then, I've been employed as a hospital pharmacist. I work for Novant Health at Presbyterian Medical Center. Since then, I acquired my board certification in pharmacotherapy specialist degree, or certification. I do a lot of other projects with everything changing in the system, going to be physician order entry. There's a lot more free time with clinical initiatives, and that is one of them that I'd like to take part into, and I feel like I can give a lot back to the pharmacy students.
Is it fairly well an expectation, Ryan, at your place of practice that clinical pharmacists are supervising students?
Yes.
And how many students do you think you probably come through your site in any given year total? I know that's a little bit of an oddball question, but
I'd say about 15.
Yeah, so it's a significant number of students coming through every year.
Yes.
I think you've testified to this. I want to get it crystal clear. Have you been continuously practicing at the same practice site since your license was reinstated in 2000?
I've been with Novant Health, but I was up at Forsyth Medical Center before. It was difficult getting a job when I first got reinstated, so I knew someone who helped me get a job up at Forsyth, which is Novant. And then after 2 years there, I transferred to Presbyterian back in Charlotte. That's where my house is. And I've been there for 11 months since.
Ryan, have you been subject to any sort of reprimand or any sort of adverse employment action in your period of employment at Forsyth and Presbyterian that stems from the practice of pharmacy?
No, I haven't.
I do not have any further questions for Dr. Mills. I do have some for Cindy when the time's appropriate.
Questions on the board?
I have a question. When the board says that pharmacists cannot precept students, does that mean they can't be the preceptor of record, or does that mean no contact with students?
That's a great question, Mr. Mixon, and I should have clarified at the beginning. That means that they can certainly interact with students, and I'm sure every pharmacist we have out there that has a prescription is interacting with students. They cannot be the preceptor of record.
So Novant Health has multiple preceptors, I would think.
That's
Yes.
correct,
Yeah.
yes.
Any questions, board? Mr. Campbell?
Cindy, if I could just, a couple of questions for you. Ryan has been under order from the board now for over 3 years. How would you describe his compliance with his treatment and monitoring obligations in that period of time?
Ryan has been in compliance with us. He has not been sent to the compliance committee during that time. He has had a few little blips. They've all been missed calls, which is common that happens at least once a year. And he's had one in 2014, one in 2013, and 2 in 2012. But I don't think that those are clinically indicative of any issues going on.
From a treatment and monitoring perspective, with respect, do you as his case manager have any concern that taking on preceptor responsibilities is likely to cause him to engage in relapse behavior?
I don't think so. I think Ryan does a really good job of balancing his life and is able to adjust. I don't think that adding a student would affect his ability to practice pharmacy safely.
And if you have an opinion on this, do you think that Ryan's precepting students might have specific benefits for him in his recovery?
I do. I think that Ryan would be a very good preceptor. A lot of Ryan's substance use started when he was in pharmacy school, and so I think that he would be a great resource for students who are coming through there and could talk to them. And if somebody were to share anything with him, he would be a great resource for them. Ryan has also been a great tool for PRN. He's come with us several times and spoken to the different pharmacy schools, and we've gotten great feedback from the professors. I mean, even some still talk about that today, and it's been a while since Ryan has gone, but it's been very beneficial.
So to sum for the record, he has in some sense engaged in preceptor, like not in any way violating the order. I don't mean to suggest that,
Right.
but preceptor type behavior relationship with the students right now. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
I don't have any further questions for Cindy.
Any questions for Mr. Mills or Ms. Cindy? Actions on the board?
I'd like to enter a motion that we approve this request.
Motion by Mr.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Let them look from this order. Mr. Campbell, you take care of that?
Yep, Ryan, I will, just like I said, I'll issue an order that lifts that condition. I'll send a copy to you, send a copy to Cindy. Congratulations, good to see you again, and best of luck going forward. Yep. If I could just have a moment, Mr. President. Feel like a assistant DA over here today with a stack of files I have in front of me to go through. Mr. President, next item on the agenda, we have consideration of a reciprocity applicant, Mr. Thomas Warren Height. I think hey, come on up. Come on up and have a seat over there at the other table. And should I call you Tom?
Tom is fine.
All right, very good, thank you. And I'm trying to close a window here. I'm having I think I'm just, middle age is kicking in hard on me today, I think, with the use of technology.
Middle age.
Whatever. Thanks for that. At best. Okay. Members of the board, you have before you, and Tom, you've heard sort of the process I go through here on this, so I won't repeat that for the third time today. Tom has filed an application to reciprocate his Maine license to practice pharmacy to North Carolina. Tom was completely candid on his applications for reciprocity in disclosing prior actions in Maine, and there are copies of the actions. I'm going to summarize, Tom, and certainly you'll have more than ample opportunity if I misstate something or not to correct that. So on both his NABP license transfer application and his North Carolina Board of Pharmacy reciprocity application, Dr. Height did disclose in June of 2007, the Maine Board of Pharmacy summarily suspended his license to practice pharmacy as a result of theft of hydrocodone and Suboxone products from his then place of practice. He subsequently agreed to a consent order of revocation in August of 2007. In March of 2009, the Maine Board of Pharmacy entered an order reinstating Dr. Height's license to practice pharmacy with conditions, and those conditions included compliance with a contract with the Maine Medical Professional Health Program, individual counseling, treatment by an addictionologist, reporting requirements, hours restrictions, and not acting as a pharmacist in charge. Excuse me. As a result of his diversion, Dr. Height was convicted of a misdemeanor count of unlawful possession of a controlled substance, resulting in a suspended 6-month jail sentence followed by probation that was completed successfully. On November 7th, 2013, the Maine Board of Pharmacy granted Dr. Height's request to terminate all conditions on his license to practice pharmacy. The Virginia and New Hampshire boards of pharmacy followed suit. In 2010, the Massachusetts and Pennsylvania boards of pharmacy, and he did disclose this, denied Dr. Height's applications to reciprocate licensure to those states due to the orders that were against your license at the time. I think it's correct, Tom, but you correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think you've reapplied since the 2013 lifting.
I'm actually in the process.
In the process
with
of that.
Only Pennsylvania, not Massachusetts.
But I did want to represent, I think I'm representing correctly for the record, that those, there has not been any subsequent action by either of those two states.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So Dr. Height is before us today requesting that requesting this board allow him to continue with the reciprocity process. I would like to ask Tom some questions, and Cindy probably needs to get you to swear or affirm on that. Tom, I do want to say for the record that I do appreciate your candor, your complete candor on this application, in disclosing not only disclosing the issues, but also disclosing all the background documents. Sometimes that can turn into quite the rabbit hole search to try to get the documents. I appreciate you making it easier. If you would then, I have described in summary what happened. If you would describe to the board in 2007 what happened, not in every detail, but in gross what happened in 2007, and particularly discuss with the board too your period with the Maine Medical Professional Health Program, and specifically whether and to what degree you have continuing obligations with that or any other program.
Sure. To summarize, started drinking in college. It's what I played baseball for, sorry to say this, but University of Connecticut. Played baseball, and my first experience was drinking with them. Went through school, graduated at near the top of the class, and quickly realized that I couldn't drink at work, and I'd been prescribed narcotics and for related sports injuries throughout high school and college, and for some reason, through process of the psychologists and such, in my mind, I figured that hydrocodone would be a safer alternative. Obviously, that turned out to be false, and was on my last day at a community pharmacy, obviously arrested and reported to the board, and that's where all the fun begins. I had to enter in on top of the main physician's health program, a treatment program called adult drug treatment court. Similar things where you call every day to go give a urine sample. In the drug court, you'd have to show up every Friday to go to court. You see a case manager. You go to 7 meetings, 12-step meetings. 7 per week of 12-step meetings and while you're in the program. On top of that, I did enter into the main physician's health program, which you call in to give a urine sample. You have a peer monitor once I did start working, and give monthly reports, see a psychologist. So in summary, I was on a very short leash for quite some time. The drug treatment court was done in order to reduce the charges, and that was completed in 11 months, give or take. I can't remember the exact date, but it was a little bit less than a year. And then the main physician's health program was a 5-year commitment, so that ended a couple years ago. I can't remember the exact date again, but it was at least a couple years ago. And I missed one phone call in that 5 years because I missed a phone call in the drug court. That was kind of a long story and a little embarrassing, but I was at a charity golf tournament, forgot to call in, and they put me in jail for 2 days. So again, very short leash, and because of that, I missed a call from the physician's health program. So since then, do you want me to stop there? It's what kind of up to this part, or
feel free to
am
do it. This is
I want to roll. So
no, go keep rolling.
all right. Since then, the basis of what's different now than 7 years ago is the 12-step meetings. I've got a sponsor with 32 years of sobriety. I sponsor other people. And the trick is that, in that first year, nobody likes to be forced to go into these meetings. I haven't met somebody that comes in and is like, "Thank God I'm here." It's pretty miserable. Life is rough inside and outside, and I've seen people grow. I've seen people fail, and I didn't want to be one of those people that fail. The numbers shot out to me was 1 in 32 make it in the 12-step program, and I said, well, I'm going to be that one. Since then, that first year, since I started working, actually doing the suggestions of the program, I started to feel comfortable in my own skin, and it had been a long time since I'd felt that. And the trick is, in that first year, when I started to feel a little better about myself, even though life around me was, as you were just read to, was a little chaotic, the trick to getting 2 years of sobriety is to do the same things you did in the first year, so on and so forth. So I've actually just celebrated my 7th year last May, and don't see a need to change anything I've been doing at this point.
If I could ask Tom, quick, just to sort of go back and recap a little bit.
Sure.
You were released from the main physician's or health program in 2012, and you were released from that with successful completion of the 5-year period of treatment and monitoring.
Correct. Yeah.
And is it correct that you've continued since that time? I think that's what you were testifying. I just want to make sure it's clear. Since that time, you've continued in 12-step programs?
Correct.
And you're doing this in Maine, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I live in Maine. Right.
This is going to sound like a veer, but I promise I'll try to bring it back to the main point. What are your plans with practice? Are you planning to move to North Carolina, or?
If it was up to me, it would be a consideration, but my wife says no.
So your plan is
too many storms, bugs, and poisonous things. Maine's fine.
Yeah.
I like the golf all year, but she says no.
So your plan, at least for the foreseeable future,
we're not moving.
You're still going to be in Maine.
Yeah, I'm going to be staying in Maine.
So you would continue with your 12-step program in Hawaii, Maine. All right.
Correct.
So why are you getting licensed in North Carolina?
I work for a remote pharmacy.
That's what
You guys all know what.
Right. Remote. Yeah. You're engaged in remote medication order
Correct.
entry
Correct.
process.
I'm a supervisor for a company called eFarm Pro.
Right.
And I think
I stipulate I'm familiar with the company. They are licensed in good standing in North Carolina. That's what I was, and the reason I was asking that obviously is if you were planning to move, I was curious about what your plans were with getting involved in a 12-step program here.
Right.
But what you're telling me is there's going to be a continuity of the program.
That's actually one of the bigger reasons I have family in Connecticut where I went to school, and we were planning on moving there. And the first thing my wife did was look up meetings. So it's a lifestyle change that's. Basically, I have a lot of support, essentially.
Right.
And it doesn't matter where we'd move. There's meetings that I would need to continue with.
Are you being actively monitored by the Maine Board of Pharmacy in any respect now?
Negative. Not,
And that's a
not
result
anymore.
of the Maine lifting all those conditions in
Correct.
2013.
Correct.
With respect to the New Hampshire and Virginia actions, is it correct that any conditions they had placed on your license were merely reciprocating conditions that Maine had placed? Is that
Correct. During the consent agreement, I applied to those states, and they agreed to just adopt the consent agreement from Maine.
And so after
once that was-
Maine issued an order reinstating your license without conditions, New Hampshire and Virginia followed suit, is
Correct.
that correct? And again, just to be sure I got a bow on all of it, the Massachusetts and Pennsylvania denials in 2010, you are in the process now of applying for licensure in those states a second time, is that right?
Not Massachusetts,
Okay.
just Pennsylvania, Ohio, and where's the other one? Oklahoma.
And this is a consequence of providing remote medication order entry
Correct.
services in each of those states as well, is
Right.
that right?
Yeah.
Do you now have, you discussed that you went through the program to reduce the charges that stem from your diversion and completed that. Are there any residual criminal actions open stemming from that or any other activity?
Negative.
Okay. I don't think I have any more questions for,
Any questions, board members? So what we're asking here is just for.
well,
approval.
yeah, let me, if I could, just recap for it. This comes before the board again with tremendous appreciation for Tom for being disclosing fully the issues in the background. Obviously, it's a complicated application because of that history. So this is before you because in any case where you have a background of this seriousness, that's not something that staff is comfortable passing on. That's something that we believe public health and safety requires you as the experts and the regulators to hear. So what Tom is asking for is an order from this board allowing him to continue with the reciprocity process. He obviously will have to take and pass the MPJE and do those things, but that's what he's asking for. It was a serious background here. He does have unrestricted licenses though in his home state and the other states in which he's been, and staff, frankly, is comforted that he's still going to be in Maine and still has a continuity of his program up there. So from a staff position, I don't have any objection to this, certainly not that my objection matters one way or the other, but I don't have any objection to this board determining that he may proceed through the reciprocity process. But given the background, I did think it was very important that you guys hear that background and come to your own conclusions about that.
Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Will there be any assurance that if by chance he does choose to locate here, there'll be a continuity to any type of monitoring program?
Well, that's something you could certainly consider. As Tom has testified, and Tom, feel free to jump in if I say something that's wrong here. But
Probably
he,
should address that question to you.
Yeah.
I apologize. I will readdress that to you.
yeah. Well, let me just say real quick, he did testify. He has been discharged from his program, from the main program, and Tom, you can talk about if you want to go back and revisit the continue program, but that's not. You're in that program not because you're being ordered to do that by the main professor. You're doing that as a part of your
I'm
continuing
doing that
course.
as a lifestyle change. That's,
Voluntarily.
in summary, what makes life good, and there's no need to stop that for me.
This board could, if it chose, say you could put a condition that say if Tom relocated to North Carolina, that he would be expected to continue in a treatment program. The caution about that is he has been released from the main program, so you would have to decide, and you could decide that you would want him to be seen by NCPRN or evaluated some sort. Should he ever relocate here, that would you do have the discretion to do that. But he has been released from the main program.
All right.
And I'm certainly not advocating that.
No, I understand, Mr. Minton. I just wanted to make sure I was covering the bases.
Mr. Mixon?
Where was the omission?
There's not an omission. There's not an omission. He has disclosed everything.
Okay.
And then some. Right. The opposite of what I'm used to.
Pleasure of the board.
I move we proceed, let him proceed with reciprocity
Okay. Have a motion.
process here in North Carolina.
Have a motion by Mr. Parker.
Second.
Second, Ms. Minton. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Tom,
Thank you.
here's what I'll do. You'll get a little order from me that indicates that the board has allowed you to proceed. And so what you will do now is continue to be in touch with Missy Betts, who I'm sure you've talked to before, about getting an authorization to test, to take the MPGA. I'm sure you're looking forward to that, and proceed on with the rest of the process.
And I'll most likely see you folks again, because after that. or was
Yeah,
it-
at some point, you'll have to hoof it back down
Couple-
here,
couple-
for-
yeah.
and you'll get a very entertaining hour-and-a-half lecture from me on practicing
Hopefully we
North Carolina law.
traveling last night. Very good.
Right.
Thank you
I,
much.
Arthur, when did you graduate from the University of Connecticut?
2004, so my first and last year.
Did you know the Ferrari, Stephanie Ferrari?
I did not.
Okay.
But I apologize, I didn't need to the first year.
You don't have to apologize to me. I was in an office in Dallas. I'm a Tar Heel brother. I was in an office in Dallas, loudly rooting for UConn in that game.
Mr. Campbell,
Thanks, Tom.
we'd like to take a 15-minute
I
break.
would love that.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn for about 15 minutes. We'll come back at 10:20. Okay?
President, next item on the agenda, we have another request, or consideration of another reciprocity candidate, Laura Crouch. I think Laura here. Hey, Laura, come on up. Have a seat right over there. Laura, I assume you've been here for all of these thus far, so have you been in here? So you've seen the sort of the process we're going through on this. Seeing if you go ahead and swear her affirm, and I'll give an introduction.
Yes, ma'am.
Laura, before I get started, you're Dr. Crouch, is that correct? Or no, you're like me. You're a BS in pharmacy.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good. It's good for all us BSers to stick together, I guess. Then good, I'll proceed. Mr. President, Ms. Crouch has filed an application to reciprocate her South Carolina license to practice pharmacy to North Carolina. She has been fully candid in disclosing in those applications a background, and the background is that she disclosed on both the NABP transfer application and the Board of Pharmacy reciprocity application. Then in September of 2011, Ms. Crouch and the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy entered into a consent order of discipline arising from Mrs. Crouch's admission of having forged and filed fraudulent prescriptions for various non-controlled prescription drugs, and there were several of those, for her personal use and distribution to others. Her license was suspended for 1 year. That suspension was stayed upon compliance with various conditions that included a pharmacist in charge prohibition, a fine, and participation in the South Carolina Recovering Professional Program. I do note, and you do have this order as well, that in September of 2012, the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy did release Ms. Crouch from the terms and conditions of the 2011 consent order. Ms. Crouch is here seeking a ruling that she could continue with the reciprocity application process, and that's why we're here today. So, Laura, if I could just ask you to, they have the board members have the document in front of them. If you would explain in a little more detail the background that led to the consent order of discipline with the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy in 2011.
Yes, sir. Actually, the prescriptions were written in 2010.
Right, but
and-
the board took action in
Yes,
2011, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because I had to go through a series of, I had to go through like a rehab and prove that I was not on drugs and alcohol and things like that. And passed all that, and then I had to. There was some time in there, and I didn't really know what was going on because I didn't know. I don't think they really knew what to do with me because they told me I was the success story because I didn't have any drugs or anything in my system, and so I don't do anything like that. And so then I got a letter from the lawyer from the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy, and I met with Mr. Anderson, but he wouldn't show me the prescriptions. I only know who 3 of the prescriptions are for. One of them was for myself, the Levaquin. I had a UTI, and I was working 3 jobs, and I couldn't get to the doctor. 2 of them were for my ex-husband, and it was for Allegra and an antibiotic. And the other 2, I really don't know who they were for because I never got to actually see the prescriptions.
Let me just, if I could ask, just to make this clear, the information that the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy found as fact, and I am not here to relitigate any of that or say that but their finding of fact was prescriptions for fexofenadine, Levaquin, Vigamox, Ceftonir, and Avalox. Is it correct that none of these, and look, I'm not excusing the behavior, and I do want to talk more about that, but none of these were prescriptions for controlled substances, is that correct?
Yeah, none were for controlled substance, and I take full ownership in that. But I don't know who they were for, but I couldn't sign up for 3. I had to sign up for all 5. So
Let me back up. And again, I'm not trying to trap you in anything here at all, but let me back up. So you were ordered by the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy to participate in the South Carolina Recovering Professional Program.
Right.
None of these drugs were controlled substances.
None of them.
Correct.
Right.
Were you, if you know, was the purpose of referring you to the South Carolina Recovering Professional Program to determine whether any substance abuse behaviors contributed to what you did, or what was the background on that?
I think they didn't know what to do with me, so they just put me under a big umbrella with everybody else.
So it is correct, though, that you reported to the South Carolina
I did,
Recovery and Professional
for
Program,
1 year.
and you were evaluated during that time period? is
I
that
just
right?
went from, all I had to do was call in every day to take drug tests, and then I had to go to meetings once every 3 months and pay fees to be in the South Carolina RPP. I didn't have to go to any kind of meetings or any kind of psychiatric evaluations or any type thing like that. I just
Did you ever, during that 1 year period, test positive for taking any prescription drug or illicit drug that you
No,
had not
sir,
been
I
prescribed
did not.
legitimately?
I don't.
I think you had described, is it correct, and I may be mixing things up, that before you had the order with the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy, did you go and get some sort of evaluation, or you?
No, they made me go to Atlanta. The Board of Pharmacy made me, in order to main South Carolina RPP, in order to maintain my license, to keep them. I never lost my license. I
Right,
kept
I
it the whole
understand
time.
that.
They made me go to Atlanta to a 4-day thing called Mars to get an evaluation to make sure that they sent everybody down there. They said that gets
Right.
caught with whatever. I don't even know. I went to jail for Allegra. That's what I got charged with. So, which was cleared up. I don't have a background or anything anymore. It's
I
clear.
can stipulate that for the
And
record,
so-
there's not.
And so they made me go down there, and they took blood and urine and everything they could.
And at the conclusion of this, there was no finding that
Right,
you
and
had any
that's what they
substance
said. I was
abuse
a
issue.
success story, and I went down there in like January, and then I didn't get this until September, this consent agreement. So there was a long time when I didn't hear from anybody from the board or from the South Carolina RPP or from DHEC or anybody. So I didn't know really what was going on. So I was just kind of in limbo. I didn't know what was going to happen.
But we can't, what is clear whatever things the South Carolina Board did or did not do to your satisfaction, but the facts are, there was no finding of a substance abuse
No,
problem,
sir.
correct? You went through this program, you were monitored for a year, there was no
Right.
finding of any abuse of substance during that period. Backing up then, you'd started to talk about this, and it's probably my fault that sort of diverged off of that. You do admit that you had forged some small number of prescriptions for yourself and for an ex-husband. Again, you said you're taking responsibility for that. Again, would you explain the background to what happened there?
Yes, sir. I do take full ownership in what I've done. I will never do it again. I learned my lesson. I did write those prescriptions because I needed one for myself because I had a UTI and I couldn't get to the doctor. My ex-husband was sick. I wrote it for him. The other two, I'm not sure who they were for, but if they said I done it. I take full ownership in it. I don't know. I didn't get to see the prescriptions. I promise you, I will never ever do it again. I have paid the price, and I will never ever. Let me just reiterate that again.
I think, for the record, I'll stipulate plenty of never-evers were communicated.
Because y'all don't know what it's like to go to a rehab whenever you don't do drugs and you're surrounded by people that are really strung out, like on heroin and things of that nature, and it was very scary for me.
So a year passed while you were under this contract or under this order from the board. You could not act as a pharmacist in charge. The South Carolina Board, I'm stating the obvious, but is it correct that in September of 2012 they released you from all the terms and conditions of that order?
Yes, sir. I'm currently in good standing.
So
now.
your license in South Carolina is unrestricted.
Right. Yes.
You can practice at the site of your choosing. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
You could be a pharmacist manager.
Yes, sir. I would love to have a job right now. That's why I'm here.
Well, and that's obviously leading to the next question is, what are your plans with North Carolina?
I live in Rock Hill, South Carolina, which is right on the border of Charlotte, and there's so many more opportunities in Charlotte and Gastonia and Raleigh. There's not any opportunities I've reached out as far as Spartanburg and Greenville, which is like an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute drive. I've been a retail pharmacist for 18 years, and that's my passion. And I can't seem to find a job in my area, so I'm trying to go to Columbia and other areas, but Charlotte's closer to me, so that's why I'm reaching out to North Carolina to try to get a license so I could be closer to home.
When were you last, well, let me just ask you, when were you last employed as a
I'm
pharmacist?
employed now,
Okay.
part-time,
Okay.
but that doesn't pay my bills. I have 4 dogs, so I have a lot of bills. I don't have any kids though.
Since September 2012, when the South Carolina Board released you from the conditions of the 2011 consent order, have you been charged with, subject to any disciplinary action by the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy or any other board of pharmacy?
No, sir, I don't do anything without, whatever the law, goes strictly by the law. I mean, strictly. I will not touch nothing. I don't feel nothing early. I don't care how mad they get. They can just get mad.
That would be nice. I would get, at least I get fewer phone calls if more people had that attitude, I think. I don't have any further questions for Ms. Crouch. And certainly board members may. I brought this to you obviously because there was an order here, a 1-year order that I felt I needed to do, and there was a lack of clarity to me in your order and I think obviously as Ross trying to elicit the testimony, there was the reference to the participation in the South Carolina Recovery and Professional Program, yet I could find no evidence in the record that there was in fact a substance abuse problem, and that's why I wanted to get the testimony here today to discuss this. But I'll certainly leave it open to any questions you have. There's no question Ms. Crouch did violate the law in South Carolina, as she has testified that she did. She's now unrestricted and has been for close to 2 years. But if there are questions, feel free to ask. This was a confusing file to me, and or I say that with no disparagement to you whatsoever. It was a confusing file to read. So
It's confusing for me too.
obviously, yeah.
Any questions from the board?
Yes, sir. Ms. Crouch,
Yes, sir.
your North Carolina application has a question, have you ever been discharged? So tell us about what happened at Walmart. I was discharged for a technician's license not being hung on the wall. That seems awfully strict.
Yeah, it was. That's why I got fired, and I could have brought that paperwork with me, but I didn't.
Was there more to that story?
No, sir, it wasn't. I was worked all day on a Monday, of course. They let me work till 7 o'clock, and then my district manager took me to the back, and he, I don't even know if I want to say this out loud. The guy that the license was not on the wall. They were there, but they wasn't on the wall. He was gay, and he dressed kind of like a girl and wore his hair really nice, and I think that they had a problem with him being in the pharmacy. He got fired also, and I got fired too.
You mean the technician?
Yes. And I kept that. I got a copy of it because I couldn't believe I got fired for that. For gross misconduct.
Was it a new technician?
No,
I mean,
sir.
was it something you had just received and hadn't had time to put it on the wall
Right, I
or
just
something?
hadn't had time to put it on the wall. Yes, sir. It was a new. He had been a cashier, and then he had got applied. We're going to cross train him to be a technician, and we got it in the mail, and I hadn't put it on the wall. So that was it. I'd been there 8 years. I worked there. I was my last site as my rotation was at Walmart. They offered me a job, and I became pharmacy manager 6 months after I got there, and I stayed there for 8 years, and then I got fired.
How about the Walgreens discharged for violation of company policy, which they didn't inform you what the policy was?
Well, I finally found out. They said that I was rude to a customer.
Did you refuse to fill the prescription early?
No, sir. I had to give a shot, and to people that were going on a mission trip, and it's first come, first serve. And I was working in Gaffney, and it's a very busy store. And the people that come in, the shots come in. You take them as they come, and I give the shots. And this gentleman was mad because I reckon he didn't see them come in, and because they were standing back, and it was the man and his daughter and his wife that were going on a mission trip with their church. And so whenever I come back out, he called me a couple cuss names, and he said, I'm not gonna repeat them in here because I know y'all recording it, and I didn't say anything. I said, sir, they were before you, and he kept on, and so he called in the next day, and he just said that I was rude to him, and Walgreens didn't listen to my side of it, and he said I wasn't doing anything, but I had to go through. There were 70 in the queue, so I had to go through and find his prescription, which was for a Z-Pack and some Vinegar and DM, and I filled it, and it just wasn't quick enough for him, and Walgreens just, they just let me go.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the board? Closed or?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, Mr. President. Again, my purpose here, as much as anything, was to get some clarity, because the substance abuse suggestion that was in that, I did not think that there was a substance abuse issue, but I wanted to get testimony to that effect.
Maybe a couple of questions to follow up, just to clarify. Currently, you're working part-time, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Who are you working for now?
South End Pharmacy.
South End. When you were terminated from Walgreens for the company policy, which said that you didn't know what it was, but you did find out later, what was the process? Did you ask for reconsideration, or you say they didn't listen to you? Is that, I'm having a hard time understanding how you could terminate a pharmacist because a customer called and complained without some type of response on your part to clarify your situation.
Well, I had a pharmacy manager that I work with that I have all the emails in my car. I can go get them. He wrote an email in October that said that he didn't like me, that he didn't like working with me, and that he was going to have me terminated no matter how many times he had to write me up. Well, from that point on, there was no more write-ups. He just went straight to termination.
So there was some type of controversial stuff
Between
going
me
on.
and him.
Right.
But he didn't like me personally. I went to see a lawyer because I thought it was some type of harassment, but it was not harassment. It was just the lawyer said he didn't like me personally. And, I don't know why he didn't like me personally. I mean, I'm a Gamecock fan. He was from Ohio State. I don't know.
Well, that is serious grounds.
Yeah.
I was stipulated in South Carolina. That
Yeah,
probably is.
I understand that. So you were not the pharmacy manager in the Walgreens store?
No,
that
sir.
you
I was
terminated?
just staff
Okay.
pharmacist, and like I said, he was just he couldn't talk to any women in the pharmacy, technician wise or otherwise, pharmacists, without the store manager being present. And like I said, I wasn't supposed to see that email, but my DM forgot to unattach it whenever he sent it back, because he said for us not to. Yeah, it was a hot mess. He forgot to unattach it, but it said we don't manage out, we manage up. And so, my DM was trying to tell him you need to manage up, not out. And so, but he was said that no matter what, he was going to have me terminated.
And it appears that, was there some type of underlying situation similar to that going on at the Walmart when you were discharged for not having the technician license on the wall?
No.
Is that grounds for the dismissal at Walmart if you don't have the technician license on the wall? You were the pharmacist manager, is that right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't know what was going on. I mean, I just didn't have them put on the wall yet. I didn't have a frame for them, and I just kind of had them laying there, and I didn't have them put on the wall. So, like I said, I'm not sure about.
They just took you back and said, listen, you didn't have that technician license hanging on the wall today, so
I know,
we're
it's
gonna let
crazy.
you go. Is that right?
Yes, sir. And I swear to God on the oath, that's what it says.
Yeah,
And
I believe you.
and I mean that maybe they just wanted to get rid of me because I was getting that big fat bonus because I had a good tight inventory, and I was doing well there, and I don't know. We was over the OTC and the pharmacy department, and I had a tight inventory, and I don't know. I did get my bonus though, so but like I said, I'm not telling any stories. I could show all of it to you. I got it with me.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not. I got fired twice, but that's the only time. I wasn't good though.
I will just for background on the board, when we ask these questions on our licensure applications about prior terminations, Obviously, the purpose behind that is determined, is there some pattern or practice or something that raises concerns about fitness to practice pharmacy, not just are you a good employee or not. Staff would not have brought this case to you for your review if that were the only issue that had been disclosed. We brought it, and although it's certainly an appropriate subject of inquiry, but it was before you because of the disciplinary order from the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy.
But everything was.
I just want you guys to not think that staff are denying applications because somebody says they lost their job. That we don't do that.
But
Only if
everything was,
there's some evidence.
but everything was disclosed.
Correct.
Okay. Everything was forthcoming. Okay. Pleasure of the board.
I'd like to tender a motion that we approve her application, her request to move forward with reciprocity.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. You can proceed with your process, Mr. Campbell.
Okay, Laura, so what will happen is I'll send you a copy of the board's decision to let you proceed. And you'll continue to work with Missy Betts, who I know you've had communication with about getting your authorization to test to take the North Carolina NPJE. And then as soon as you pass that, I'm sure you will, then you'll move on through the process as any other candidate would.
Thank y'all
All right.
for your time. I appreciate it, y'all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Laura.
Have a good day.
All right.
Fist.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, sir. I'm pulling up. Next item on the agenda is consideration of another reciprocity candidate. Gopi Hudka. I hope did I pronounce that correctly? Hudka. I'm sorry. So come on up. Dr. Hudka, I presume you've been sitting back there, so you've heard sort of the process on these, and so I'm going to go through the same process as these. Cindy, if you would go ahead and ask her to swear or affirm. Background on this case, members of the board. Dr. Hudka filed an application to reciprocate a Massachusetts license to practice pharmacy to North Carolina. And you have the appropriate documents behind your tab, and that is the application from NABP, the North Carolina application, and some electronic mail correspondence from Dr. Hudka. Question 2 of our reciprocity application asks, have you ever failed state board examination? Dr. Hudka answered no. When we received Dr. Hudka's NABP reciprocity application, page 1 appeared to show that Dr. Hudka had failed the New Jersey multi-state jurisprudence exam. She did subsequently pass it, but had failed it. Board staff inquired of Dr. Hudka concerning the apparent discrepancy, and Dr. Hudka did provide an email message in which she explained that, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. So Dr. Hudka is before there because there. It appears to staff there's a misrepresentation on the application. I want to talk about that, let you hear Dr. Hudka's explanation for that, and then discuss that further. So, Dr. Hudka, if you would state your name for the record, so it's recorded on the, if you would state your name into the microphone so it's recorded. State your name.
Gopi Hudka.
Dr. Hudka, it is correct, is it not, that you filed an application to reciprocate your Massachusetts license to practice pharmacy to North Carolina? Is that correct?
Yes.
And you acknowledge, I think, and it indicated in your email that the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy reciprocity application asked, have you ever failed a state board examination? Do you recall that question? Yeah, and do you recall your answer to that question was no? Is that correct? And you signed that reciprocity application indicating that you were had answered truthfully. Is it in fact correct that you did not pass the New Jersey multi-state pharmacy jurisprudence exam the first time you sought to take that exam? If you would, and the board members do have an email that you sent showing this, and I'd be happy to share your email with you in case you don't come here, and I'll let you have a copy of that. Now, I think in the email when we asked about the discrepancy, this is just so you'll have it, so you can take a look at that. Asked about the discrepancy, I think you answered that you were debating whether the answer to question number 2 should be yes or no. What was your debate?
Because when I read it's a board, state board examination, I consider board as just a NAPLAX examination, and I thought, okay, it must be just the no, because I passed first time the NAPLAX examination, and I considered NAPLAX as just the board, not just MPJE. That was my debate about to put yes or no.
But you do understand that to be licensed in New Jersey at the time, you had to pass both the NAPLEX examination and the New Jersey version of the MPJE, correct?
Right.
So you know that both of those examinations were required for licensure in New Jersey. When you debated back and forth what the answer to that question was, did you call the Board of Pharmacy in advance? Did you talk to the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy in advance to ask about that?
No, that was my mistake. I should call you guys and just confirm, what should I put.
And you do understand, or do you understand why the board asked for this sort of information on an application?
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think the board asked for that sort of information?
Because just for the the record in the past, if I pass, like which states I have the license for, and if I pass the exam, like the law exam.
And would you agree that that it's important to answer all questions on an application to a licensing body fully and candidly? And sitting here today, if you had to go back and fill out the application again for North Carolina, what would your answer to question number 2?
Now it should be yes.
I know I asked if you talked to the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy about that, and you answered no to no staff. Did you talk to anybody else about how to answer that question?
No. Even I looked up online when I was filling application, like what board exam means, and I just it just come up as like a NAPLEX. It just like it was different state like California, but it online was just coming up as like a board examination, like a first time the NAPLEX examination, and that was my idea, and that's why I put just no. But even I knew like reciprocal it would come up the score. First time I failed the New Jersey examination, so it was an honest mistake. It was nothing like I wanted to hide something, or it's just I didn't understand the question correctly.
I don't have any further questions for Dr. Hookah, board members. I do want to come back and sort of summarize if I could. And certainly Dr. Hookah, anything else she'd like to say as well, but questions from the board members.
Any questions from the board members?
Mr. Campbell, if we deny this application, what is the general rule as far as reapply?
In a year. If it's denied, it's reapplication in 1 year. I would like to come back and talk about that in a summary, if I could, about how this ties in with similar cases like this. But that is an important point, Mr. Mann. Thank you.
Mr. Hookah, Ms. Hookah, do you have any comments you'll make to the board at this time?
No, just I apologize for the mistake and taking your time. But again, I'm telling you, it was just the honest mistake. I didn't understand the question, and that was it from my side.
Okay. Mr. Campbell?
There was clearly misrepresentation on our application, just like we've seen in other cases. And I appreciate that Dr. Hookah realizes now that that was not the correct answer. Again, it's standard. When you're in, this is incredibly important stuff. We have to have this information to do our jobs in vetting these candidates. What this board has done in similar cases, where specifically with respect to failure to disclose or prior failure of an examination, is state that has issued orders which I think would be appropriate in this case, given the communications with Dr. Hookah prior to this meeting, is to, my recommendation with staff would be to instruct board staff to hold this application for 90 days. And at the conclusion of that 90 days, she could be deemed eligible to proceed forward with receiving an authorization test to take the MPJ and process through. A 90-day penalty of that sort is fully consistent with what you've done in factual circumstances that are, in my opinion, materially identical to the case you have before you today.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I'd like to make that motion that he just stated at the current time.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Kuka will honor your request, but there will be a 90-day hold, and Jay, you'll take care of all that.
Right. What'll happen, Dr. Hookah, is your application will be held for 90 days, and at the end of that 90 days, and I'll send this to you, and Missy Betts, who's sitting right here, is aware of this, will know that after 90 days, you will be eligible to receive an authorization to test, and at that point, you can continue forward with the process. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Hookah.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Mr. President, if I could just have one moment.
Yes, sir.
Well, I have a happier agenda item next, so that's Mr. President, next item on the agenda, and well, I think Missy just walked out. I was going to give her plaudits, but I'll give her plaudits anyway. As you all know, we have in recent years begun honoring pharmacists who have been continuously licensed with us for a period of 60 years. And we do have, and he could not be here today, but I want to read it into the record, that Kenneth Wiggins, do you know Kenneth? He has been continuously licensed with the Board of Pharmacy, license number 03723. That's even earlier than Gene's license, if you can believe it. He was licensed, Mr. Wiggins was licensed with us in March of 1954 and has been continuously licensed for a period of 60 years. And so in recognition, I would like to, if I may, read a resolution honoring Mr. Wiggins, and hopefully you guys will see fit to approve that resolution. And so this states, resolution honoring Kenneth L. Wiggins in recognition of 60 years of service in the practice of pharmacy. Whereas Kenneth L. Wiggins graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1953 with a Bachelor of Science degree in pharmacy, and whereas Kenneth L. Wiggins obtained North Carolina license to practice number 03723 in March 1954, now therefore be it resolved by the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy that the board expresses its warmest congratulations and deepest gratitude to Kenneth L. Wiggins for his service to the profession of pharmacy and to the citizens of North Carolina. This is the 15th day of July, 2014, and then you'll see it here, and we will be delivering this to Mr. Wiggins. So I don't think we need a motion, but if it's the will of the board by acclamation to accept this resolution.
Absolutely. Fantastic
So
job.
where does he live?
Goldsboro.
Yeah, he lives in Wayne County. So he was very touched. We talked to him. He couldn't make it today, but we'll get this to him.
Hard to believe 60 years.
Any stories you want to share about Mr. Wiggins in his absence that he cannot rebut and the like? But credit to this goes to, this is something we started, Missy is the one who gets this together and monitors this and has these printed up and framed, and she does a terrific job with this. And I know she talked with Mr. Wiggins about this. So Missy, thank you as always for all the things you do and for doing this. So.
Thank you, Missy.
Mr. Campbell, just for the record, I will say that my license number is 6374. You ask Mr. Marks at this time, what is his license
The last time I checked with sales, I think it had 3 zeros. It was a 3-digit number.
You what number one was it?
Close. A total tale about since we're joking around about this, there was along these lines, when I lived in Rhode Island for a year, a big deal in Rhode Island was try to get a license plate with a single-digit number, because it used to be in Rhode Island, that's how they issued them sequentially by number, and so it's a big point of pride in Rhode Island to drive around with, number 8 or something. So, Lizelle, if you ever move to Rhode Island, we might figure out a way to get you a low-number license plate that you can sport around Providence there.
You need to get to a point in time where you'll be honoring anybody who has a license number before mine and Lizelle's. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. Mr. President, next item on the agenda, we held a DME subcommittee election. Excuse me, that needs to be certified, and Cindy Parham has gone to a great deal of time and trouble to prepare for you a summary of the DME subcommittee election results. You have that behind your tab. I think I can represent, and Cindy can correct me if I'm wrong, that there were no irregularities noted during the election process. A grand total of 11 votes were cast in the election. All 11 votes were cast for Doug Tanucci, who is with EMSI in Charlotte. So there being no irregularities, we would submit to you, and she put together a very handy pie chart at my request to demonstrate the breakdown of the vote. I mean, look, in all seriousness, congratulations to Doug for stepping forward. I don't want to diminish that in any respect. It is a service that is providing. We appreciate Doug doing that. But the election results do need to be certified unless you have any questions.
For the folks in the audience.
Mr. President, I move that we certify these results.
Thank you.
All in favor? Motion?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Jay,
They're done.
results are been certified.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that squared away. Mr. President, I can report to you the reports to the board section. I did hear from Andy Ellen from the North Carolina Retail Merchants Association and from Mike James for the Association of Community Pharmacy. And both are, as you might imagine, fully immersed in legislative duties over on Jones Street, and sent their regrets that they would not be able to address the board today, but look forward to speaking with you at a future meeting. So with that then, Mr. President, I will be more than happy to move into the post-launch agenda items. Most of these are reports in nature. There is one item that's not so much a motion, but I do need guidance on two particular things for publication.
All right, I'll let you guide through those in order which you proceed.
Very good. Mr. President, first I wanted to give a legislative update, and if it's okay with you, Mr. President, I'll give the specific bills and also circle back to the Program Evaluation Division study, the licensing boards, which ties into that. Two bills that I wanted you to be aware of, one that has been passed, I think one that may not have been passed yet. The first is Senate 493. This is one of the regulatory reform bills. If you've been following the back and forth over in the legislature, there was an omnibus regulatory reform bill that had some provisions in it that were some source of controversy. It has been split into two different bills, and 493 I just put in front of you excuse me, is a make you aware kind of thing. There's really no action that needs to be taken. And I'm making you aware because this bill does propose to place pharmacy benefits managers under some regulation and oversight by the state. That you can find that on page 9 of Senate Bill 493, which you have behind your tab. I point this out as an informational issue only. The proposed amendments here are to the North Carolina Insurance Code, which would mean that any enforcement or regulation of these requirements would fall under the jurisdiction of the North Carolina Department of Insurance. For what it's worth, I agree that from a personal standpoint, that's the appropriate citing of that regulation. It avoids an awful lot of potential conflicts of interest. And to make you aware that that is there, I suspect that both Mike and Andy would have been happy to speak to this if they had been here today, and they may yet speak to that later on. So that is there. Sort of on a side note, I would point it out for all the discussion of licensing boards and whether they still need to exist and be combined. I'll note that this particular bill purports to create a new occupational licensing board, the North Carolina Behavior Analysis Board. So I don't know how to take that. I don't know if that's good news, bad news, or indifferent news, but there you have it. Second bill I did want to discuss, and this has been all over the press. It's not going to come as a surprise to anybody. The governor, the legislature did enact, and the governor did sign House Bill 1220, legalizing in North Carolina within certain parameters the use of a product called hemp extract for treatment of intractable epilepsy. Sort of the windshield tour, that's a good phrase. I'm going to add that to my lexicon here. The windshield tour.
I learned that from you.
That's, I plagiarized all. It wouldn't take them give, whatever. This act is set up and it makes it legal within North Carolina for certain pediatric patients who meet certain diagnostic criteria for intractable epilepsy to present themselves, to obtain a registration card from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and obtain a product called hemp extract from neurologists who are conducting clinical trials in the efficacy of hemp oil products at the University of North Carolina hospitals, East Carolina, Duke, and Wake Forest. Those providers also have certain registration requirements and the like. All of this will be administered by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, not by the Board of Pharmacy. This seems to me there's going to be a very small population of patients that are affected by this because it's the requirement that it be part of a clinical trial. I don't know how this is going to play out. I simply will point out that hemp extract is still marijuana under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, and I imagine there are going to be issues that need to be worked out about participating physicians and the like there. I wanted to make you specifically aware, and I think I sent out an email in case you get questions about this. If the question is, I have a child who has intractable epilepsy, I would like to be able to get this hemp extract from a pharmacy, can I do that? The answer is no. The statute only allows pathways through specific neurologists at specific hospitals and through the Department of Health and Human Services. More interestingly, I got a call, I actually got 2 calls, on one day from entrepreneurial guys, I guess, in the Greensboro area, who called to ask me how they could go about getting a permit from the Board of Pharmacy to begin crossbreeding marijuana to produce their own strains of marijuana. And I said, well, I'm a little unsure why you're calling me. Who told you to call me? And they said, well, the governor's office did. So I've since had a communication with the governor's office to politely and explain that, no, it's really not what we do and not what we do under the statute. But it's not inconceivable to me that some or all of you might start getting questions about how do I get hemp oil, or if I want to start growing marijuana to produce hemp oil, how do I do that? The advice I'm giving folks is I try to explain what the statute is, although these fellas, I don't think, were too interested in the legal details there. But I've been directing folks to contact the Drug Control Unit at the Department of Health and Human Services, which has specific oversight of the North Carolina Controlled Substances Act. So I would recommend doing that if there are further calls on that, and we'll see where that goes. If the governor's office refers folks to me, I'm more than happy to re-refer them wherever they need to go. If you live in Greensboro, some ditchweed guys out there that might be interested in talking to you. So that's it on those 2 things. Happy to answer any questions about either of those. Of course, everybody knows that it's the budget fight. Gene has forgotten more about the legislative session than I'll ever know. So I defer to Gene on any of those types of matters. Tying into that, the program evaluation division study, I have communicated with each of you, but so we have it on the record. We have received a survey from the Program Evaluation Division in the General Assembly. They have been charged with determining whether and to what degree some occupational licensing boards should be eliminated or consolidated. They've been charged to determine whether and to what degree some or all occupational licensing boards ought to be placed under some sort of umbrella structure. Either an umbrella to have the umbrella body, whatever it would be, do the administrative work of licensing boards versus the regulatory work, although I will tell you that's not a neat distinction at all, and that's one of our challenges is to explain that. And then also they are asking about whether there should be one super agency created to do both the administrative and regulatory work of the occupational licensing boards. So each of you have received a copy of that survey. Just to update you on our planning on that, we had an all-hands-on-deck staff meeting here. Individual staff here at the board are gathering the data that we need to supply on that survey. Staff are going to have that data to me this Friday, the 18th. By next Friday, the 25th, I intend to complete and submit to each of you a complete draft of the survey response. It will not only include the data, but as you all know, there are various essay questions at the end. As I've asked each of you, the data is the data. Y'all don't need to worry. We're collecting that internally. But any suggestions, thoughts you had about points that we need to make in the essays, Clint and I have been having those discussions, and I know that the association is aware of this effort. I know that the schools of pharmacy are aware of this effort and may have something to say. But any suggestions you have for me or anybody on the staff or Clint, we're happy to receive those. It's not my plan. What I will do is submit to each of you by the close of business Friday, July 25th, a complete draft of the survey response for your review and commentary. I would need to have that back by Monday the 28th at the close of business. I can incorporate any changes that we need to make. If we need to have a conversation, we can certainly do that. And we are due to file the survey response by close of business on Wednesday or Thursday, July 31st. I think that's Thursday, July 31st. Okay. So you guys are in the loop. I very much, of course, hope that we continue to be an independent licensing board that's directly responsible to those we regulate in the public. But
What question?
Sure.
Who is pushing this issue? Someone that. This is not coming out of the staff on its own.
It's a $64,000 question, Parker. I really all I would know I mean, Gene would know a lot more than I would know. I do know that there's some special interest groups who are not fans of occupational licensing generally and in some specifics. And I think that certain legislators that those groups may well have the ear of some legislators. Some of the talk has always been, and clearly some of the data they're seeking on this, there's always been some talk about whether some of the really small occupational licensing boards, whether they ought to continue to, are they really, and it's a fair question, are they really serving a public interest, or are they so small that they're sort of just collecting dues and they're not really enforcing an act? And this is more at the trade level than the professional level. I say that's a part of it, but it's clearly not all of it, because the various other things that are being asked about whether any licensing boards ought to be hung under an umbrella. But I don't know. I don't know who's driving this bus. I'm certainly not privy to those sorts of discussions. I think the concern that a lot of, and look, I freely acknowledge, somebody said, well, Jay, of course you're concerned. This is your job. You're concerned about this. But one of the things I'm concerned about is, and that I think that members of the public and the profession ought to be concerned about, at least with respect to boards that regulate sophisticated professions, is interposing a barrier between the public and the people we regulate for supposedly to get questions answered. I think one of our challenges is try to make clear to these folks, we're not doing a lot of menial sort of push button type stuff here. Probably the single biggest thing we do day in, day out is respond to questions and offer guidance to 12,000 pharmacists around the state and to the public, and that requires folks who understand the profession and understand the law. And I'm really concerned that creating a barrier in that winds up people wind up calling a staff person at some centralized agency that, through no fault of their own, they don't know anything about our profession or regulation. And I don't know. Obviously I have a bias, but I'm worried that there's that kind of barrier that gets created. And then there are all the other subsidiary concerns that would arise from that. I think one of our great strengths, as you guys know, because you generate these over the years, is because we're independent, we can move quickly. I mean, look how quickly we were able to turn after NECC to revamp all of our inspection procedures and policies and the like. I don't know if that sort of flexibility would be available if we're operating under some umbrella, but that's what they purport to be studying, and we certainly have our opportunity to explain our views on the matter, and hopefully folks will listen to it. What happens after the survey, I'm not sure. There is a question on the survey that asks, would you like to meet with us, the PD, and certainly at my place, absolutely, I want to have every opportunity we'd have to talk with them. I understand the overall deadline, if that's the right words, they're supposed to present this report to the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee in November, I think, and then presumably from that point, recommendations would be made about drafting legislation for the 2015 long session. I'm trying not to be alarmist about this, but this is a serious thing. It would be a very serious change in the way that all occupations, and particularly ours, is regulated in North Carolina. It has been since 1881. So we'll see what happens. That's all I know. Gene may have other thoughts on this.
I would suggest that you answer the question directly.
And we're doing that.
With no embellishment, no elaboration, and ask for the meeting. You can do all the embellishment and elaborating you choose to do.
Right.
I think that.
And they've asked very focused, and I do, and frankly, I will tell you, Mr. Benton, I do appreciate the questions they have asked. They do give you an opportunity to say what you think the pluses or the minuses are on that. But yeah, Clint and I are going to be in hunker down mode here pretty soon.
There are very few really boards who do like we do. We actually license pharmacists to practice pharmacy. And that's kind of like it's a step above most of us. I think if you do that, answer this question directly, and then ask for the meeting, you'd be the very best to do that. You know, certainly we would like to maintain our ability to elect our board members. Some people don't.
And they do ask about that specifically. Y'all have seen that. They ask specifically.
Some people seem to have an aversion to pharmacists serving on the pharmacy license board, that type of thing. So it's very important we draw together why it's important to have pharmacists overseeing those type of things. And we've not proven to be a self-serving board as far as serving the profession, which is something I would make sure that I brought out in the meeting if you have that thing. You know, that we've always served.
And certainly I will tell you, if a meeting gets scheduled, I'm not just going to march into that meeting. We'll get it scheduled, and I think all of us will need to discuss. And I don't think we all want to be sitting in a meeting while we're ganging up, but we probably do want to discuss who we'd want to have at that meeting and the like. So
just remember, they're looking for things that we don't often see.
Right.
Just like when you hadn't inspected every pharmacy last year, those type of things. So they have a totally different perspective sometimes. You got to be ready for that.
One thing I am encouraged about, I will say, although it's different PED staff that are doing this study, I had a very positive set of interactions with the PED staff that did the prescription drug diversion study. So if they are reflective of the approach in that body, that's encouraging, because I certainly in that study get the sense that they were just there to pretextually do some study and then do whatever they want. So.
Refresh my memory, I think you've told me before, of the 50 states, how many of them have this type of board part of a state?
It's a hard question to answer. I would say that the majority of states are under some sort of umbrella, but even there's a lot of variance even there as to what that umbrella means. I mean, some, like Illinois, take Illinois for example, they barely have their own investigators. I mean, essentially the board meets quarterly and promulgates rules and considers cases, and that's really about all they do. All the administrative stuff, and again, to get into these definitional issues, it's really housed to they're very centralized, Georgia, Pennsylvania, those are other boards that are very, very centralized, and the board really almost does nothing, like I say, but meet periodically. Then there are the boards that are more like us. Alabama is pretty much structured like we are. Mississippi is pretty much structured like we are. A couple of boards in the Northeast structured, a couple in the Midwest. And then the variations where there's some sort of umbrellaing for certain financial reasons, but otherwise you're fairly left apart. So, and that is one of the challenges here, is I actually, some of you know this, I had NABP take a look at sort of this issue about a year and a half ago, and you get into trying, it's hard to do apples to apples comparison, not even apples to apples. Sometimes it's like asking, is this cup more blue than that rock is heavy? There's no way to make the comparison. So I think that's part of our challenge with this. But
well, I can, having spent my career in education, not pharmacy or health, I've lived in both worlds, where at the local level, the community college has a lot of autonomy. At the state level, if you, in the system office, it's a nightmare compared to the flexibility that you have at the local level. You do not want to become a part of some, where all your personnel actions and all those kinds of things, it'll be the death of this organization as you know it today if you.
That's what I worry about. That's what I worry about.
Well, why don't we, you have just by Friday, close business on Friday?
Next Friday.
Next Friday?
And all the data today, by next Friday, the 25th, I'll have everything ready to go. And then we can round up Monday, the 28th.
I'll ask the board members to review that when he gets out to us, and then comment to Jay by Monday morning.
And
then
if
we
I
need-
can get it to you faster, I will.
Okay.
But there's a lot of pieces.
And we feel like we have any questions that need to be addressed, we can have a conference call.
Call, and call me individually
Okay.
anytime. And, you know, talk to folks, and let them know that this is going on.
Any other questions on this? All right, Mr. Campbell?
Next item on the agenda, Mr. President, I have behind your tab, and Mr. Mixon has recused himself from this particular action. You have behind your tab a proposed guidance concerning the permitting of outsourcing facilities registered with the FDA pursuant to 503B of the Drug Quality and Security Act. Bear with me, and I appreciate that you guys always do, and I'll beg your indulgence as I always do. Let me tell you how this issue has come up. You're all familiar with the new Drug Quality and Security Act. I presented on that, and some of you had to suffer through listening to me talk about it again at the NABP meeting. There's a question that I knew was going to arise, and that is whether and under what circumstance, if I'm a 503B outsourcing facility, do I need to also have a pharmacy permit? Actually, I think both sides of the question are relatively easy, and I'll talk about why I think that is. But I want to get some guidance out, and I didn't want to do that without you guys having an opportunity to comment on that. Under North Carolina law, a pharmacy is defined as any place where prescription drugs are dispensed or compounded. They have to be dispensed and compounded, dispensed or compounded. Clearly, a pharmacy that dispenses may also be a Section 503B facility. They can do both. And in my view, that's crystal clear that that facility clearly also has to hold a pharmacy permit with us. And in fact, there are 3 facilities in North Carolina right now that are pharmacies that provide patient-specific dispensing services, and they have also become a 503B facility. They're what I call in this guidance a dual-purpose facility. That to me is an easy question. Those facilities are dispensing to patients. They clearly meet the definition of a pharmacy. They don't get to give up a pharmacy permit because they are also an outsourcing facility. The flip side to the question, though, is what if I'm a facility that has never dispensed a prescription to a patient? And the specific context of this is a facility in Caldwell County, North Carolina, that is a GMP, an FDA-registered GMP manufacturing facility. That's what they do. They do contract manufacturing for pharmaceutical companies. Never dispensed a thing. They have now registered to become an outsourcing facility. The question is, by dint of becoming an outsourcing facility, do they now have to have a permit with us? I will tell you that my first reaction was yes, they do, because that definition that a pharmacy is any place where prescriptions are dispensed or compounded. Not as simple as that. The definition of compounding under state law says taking 2 or more ingredients and combining them into a dosage form of a drug, which we're all familiar with, exclusive of compounding by a drug manufacturer, distributor, or packer. Well, that makes sense, right? If you've got if Glaxo's manufacturing facility, they are combining ingredients into a dosage form. Are they a pharmacy? Clearly they're not. They're not dispensing anything to any individual patient, and the fact they're combining stuff doesn't make them so. They are a manufacturer and a distributor. So having looked at that, it is my opinion, and I think it's relatively clear, that an outsourcing facility that is not dispensing as I've got an outsourcing facility that's not dispensing or compounding any prescription drug products to individual patients, is a drug manufacturer and a distributor. There's no question. They have to be licensed appropriately by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture's Food and Drug Safety Division. But as so long as that facility is wholly engaged in those activities, is not providing any individual patient services to anyone, I do not think they fall within the definition of a pharmacy. And this is going to come up more often because, as you can imagine, and I didn't really know this, y'all probably did, there are a number of smaller GMP manufacturing facilities around the country that do contract manufacturing stuff, and it makes sense that a lot of those folks are looking into getting into the outsourcing stuff, right? If you're an outsourcing facility, you have to be GMP compliant. Well, they already are. Economically, it's easier for them to get into that business. I've been asked, and they've been great. These facilities have been great. They'll call and say, do I need a permit? If I have to get one, I'll get one, but do I have to have one? I think the answer for those outsourcing only facilities is no, you don't have to have a permit with us. Now, they do have to be registered with D of A. D of A agrees with this. They're aware of it. Under federal law, any such facility that is outsourcing only has to employ a pharmacist to oversee the outsourcing facility stuff. But just because a pharmacist is there, that doesn't make it, any more than a pharmacist sitting in an office doing MTM consulting services, that doesn't make their office a pharmacy. So I think that the answer clearly to this is no. It's popping up enough that I want to get some guidance out on this. And I know there are a lot of other states that are sort of looking to us too, that their definitions are the same and they're curious as to what we're going to do. So that in an overly long-winded explanation is the issue here. There's a clear distinction between a place that is a pharmacy and tacks on outsourcing facility stuff. They are a pharmacy. They continue to be a pharmacy. They have to be permitted by us, versus a facility that does not do any practice of pharmacy. They are only providing outsourcing products. I don't think they fit within our definition. Now, the legislature could change that. They could come in and say, we're going to make them. That's fine. But as the law stands, I don't think we...
Well, you made a clear distinction between your presentation, which I fully agree with that. What action do we need as the board to do this, or just more information?
This is a guidance document. We're not making a rule, because we don't need to make a rule. I don't even really need a motion. I just wanted you guys to have had, you've had this for at least a week to review, and we've been communicating about this, to have seen this guidance and agree that it's appropriate guidance, tell me it's okay to provide that. And I didn't want you guys to suddenly get a call from somebody who says, well, what is this about an outsourcing facility? And go, I don't know, Campbell must have done something we didn't know anything about. So,
does any board member have anything they'd like to add or disagree with what was presented? Because it seems straightforward to me the way he presented it.
I got Clint to backstop me on this thing too, so.
Any questions for Clint then?
He's the brains of
I
the
didn't do it.
operation.
Gene, any consideration on your side?
I think it's totally accurate. The way he presented it, I'm totally comfortable with that.
Okay. I'll say consensus of the board then, for
We'll
guidance
publish
person, we'll
this.
publish it.
And like I said, I do want to say these facilities have been making these inquiries. I'm very impressed. They've been very straightforward, not hiding the ball. They just want some guidance.
Sure.
And they've said if we need to have a permit, we'll get a permit. But if we don't need to have one, we'd rather not. More sympathetic I could not be.
Okay.
So I will get this published and sent out. And I'm also, just so you know, I'm also going to communicate this with NABP, because they're trying to consolidate and you can imagine all this depends on how things are defined in particular state laws.
Right.
You know, a lot of state boards of pharmacy regulate wholesalers. So these facilities would have to register in those states with the Board of Pharmacy as a distributor. That's D of A. And what we will do is continue to work with the Department of Agriculture folks so that we sort of know who they've got registered as these facilities. And if somebody suddenly decides they'd like to start being a pharmacy, then fine, we'll know about that and take
Okay.
action.
All right.
The question will come up at some point in time is, who's responsible to make sure that what they're doing is appropriate and has a good end result?
Right, and that is an issue that's going to come up, for dual use facilities where they're outsourcing and pharmacies. All we'll be able to do is, and we'll inspect for compliance with our rules and our standards in USP. We can inspect for GMP compliance, and we won't inspect for
Some
GMP.
state boards do that, right?
No,
They do
I'm not aware of any state board of pharmacy that inspects for compliance with good manufacturing practices. Only the FDA inspects to that. I don't know of any state board that has investigators trained to be GMP inspectors. So we will work those out anytime that FDA, and FDA has been good about this. If they're doing an inspection of a facility that is both a pharmacy and an outsourcing facility, they always let us know. And we'll always send our investigative staff along, and we'll look for compliance with our rules and laws and have discussions. But we can't inspect a GMP, nor should we. That's the FDA's responsibility. And for outsourcing only facilities, clearly that's only FDA's responsibility. So, thank you for that, and we'll get that published. Next, this is just an informational issue. I did want to let everybody know that our compounding advisory folks, Bill and Gigi and Ken, continue to do really terrific work and looking at the issues that are coming up and giving some advice. Just to let you know, Neil Petrie, who I know you know, Carol, I think probably most folks know, is a nuclear pharmacist at Duke, and frankly one of the nation's preeminent nuclear pharmacists. And Neil is now working with us. We've recognized their inspection. Nuclear pharmacies are odd ducks, right? We've recognized and that we need to have some specific inspection tools for nuclear pharmacies, and we have engaged Neil, just like we did Ken Latta, to help put that together. So Neil is in the process and working with the compounding working group to come up with a specific nuclear inspection tool. I'm given to believe, and Bill, I think, can echo this, that we may wind up being the first board of pharmacy in the country that comes forward with a nuclear pharmacy specific thing. So we may be providing some help to the other states, but that's just an update that's in process. We got Neil signed to a little consulting agreement to start doing that, and we'll keep you apprised of that. Certainly, when that tool is developed, we'll bring it forward to each of you to take a look at and comment on and present at a board meeting. We do appreciate Neil's. We are lucky in the state, man. I'm telling you. You want to go back in, a reason to have independent boards. I mean, we can tap all of these.
Yep.
We're really lucky. All right, next item then, Mr. President. Also need to get your okay to issue some guidance, or tell me, hold up there, Campbell. You're getting out in front of things. A question has come up a number of times about whether administration of flu vaccine has to be reported to the immunization registry. At some level, the issue appears to be clear. Well, let me back up and say that. If you look, I have behind your tab, I have language from the statute, the new vaccination statute. Note that it says, except for influenza vaccines administered under GS 90-85.15B6, and that's important, I'll come back to. Except for those flu vaccines, other vaccinations have to be reported within 72 hours to the immunization registry. Clearly, there is in this paragraph an intent that flu vaccine administrations not be reported to the immunization registry. The problem is
Stop.
Yeah.
The intent at the time it was done was, number one, the immunization registry was not ready.
Right.
Number two, a lot of pharmacists giving flu vaccinations were not involved in the immunization registry.
Right.
And I just say that.
And I will tell you right now, the immunization registry people aren't interested in flu vaccines being reported to them either. But the challenge here is this reference to B6. I know this is a stupid lawyer trick. This B6 reference, there is no B6 in the statute. The reference to administration of flu vaccines is in paragraph C. So some folks have been understandably concerned that when it says except for flu vaccines administered under B6, well, there's not a B6. So they're concerned that therefore flu vaccines have to be reported to the immunization registry. I don't think that's the case. I don't think the intent ever was to do anything except exempt flu vaccines from reporting to the immunization registry, and this was a drafting error. There were so many versions of this bill. This just got dropped. What I would like with your okay, is to publish some guidance with our other vaccine administration guidance that says this was a drafting mistake. It's clear vaccines were never intended to be reported to the immunization registry, and the Board of Pharmacy does not find in the statute a requirement that you do that. I was told that there was perhaps somebody was going to try to run a technical correction to fix this. But I don't think that's ever, if it has happened, I hadn't seen it, Gene. I don't know if you've seen anything on that, but.
I think the dialogue we had when we were having all those meetings was, it's important to be able to look up someone's vaccination history, see what they've had. But you get a flu vaccination every year, you probably can remember it from one year to the next, that type thing.
Yep. So
the decision to exempt was made based on the fact that, hey, they had one that they don't, it's not that big a deal really from that clinical
absolutely
perspective.
my understanding of it. And,
So-
and I think that's absolutely what that paragraph was intended to do. And what happened is between two versions of the bill, the flu vaccine got moved from B6 to paragraph C, and nobody fixed the
The
problem.
true intent is to not to have to put it on
Correct.
there.
I'm in agreement with that. And I'm not talking to anybody who feels differently about that. So, but I recognize, I mean, the statute says what it says, but I'd like to provide that guidance if it's okay with you guys. I'm just not, I don't think we're setting ourselves up for some sort of insurrection that we're not enforcing the law or whatever.
All board members comfortable with that? All right, Jay.
I'll
Yes.
do it. Thank you for that. I apologize again. I know this is a lot of lawyer-specific type stuff. Pharmacy Leaders Forum Planning Update. A reminder, everybody, if you would, before you leave today, check in with Leslie, we've gotten some requests for invitations from Carol, we appreciate that, from Bill, we appreciate that. We need to get our save the dates out to the folks we're gonna invite, so I would ask if everybody's here, take a look at the invitation list from last year, or if you have anybody you wanna invite, let's get it, because we only have 15, so we wanna make sure we divvy up those slots. But if you would, please, and if you don't have any suggestions, that's fine, but we want to go ahead and get that settled up. Carol, Bill, I do appreciate, as always, your suggestions on that. The planning continues apace on that. Dan Barber, as I reported, Dan Barber and Ron Reagan are chairing the planning. I know that Carol and Bill are right now setting up a meeting with them to look at that further, but I do think it's coming along. I think you guys are going to have some good input for them on that, but I do appreciate Dan and Ron have really done some yeoman's work on pulling that together. So again, check with Leslie. She's got the list. If there's somebody you want to look at who we invited, and Leslie also has the suggestions from Bill and Carol, and if I think we pretty easily get consensus on 15 people to invite, we'll do that, but I want to go ahead and lock that up. District 3 meetings, just a reminder, I think everybody who intends to go has said so. If you don't, there's the Secretary Treasurer of NABP District 3, and she can. I think we are past the room block of the DoubleTree, but we can make alternative arrangements. It's nothing like Charleston in August.
What's the date again?
It's August 2nd through the 5th. Yeah, in Charleston. So
Bring some heavy clothes.
yeah, absolutely. Board representatives to the CPP Joint Subcommittee. We last appointed CPP Joint Subcommittee members at the May 2012 meeting, and that was Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Minton, Mrs. Day, and Mr. Mixon. We haven't had a need to have a CPP Joint Subcommittee in recent months, but the CPP Advisory Committee has an issue that I think they'd like to bring before the CPP Joint Subcommittee. Mr. President, what I'd like to do, it certainly could be the same four folks on this, but what I'd like to do is confirm what our membership of the CPP Joint Subcommittee is. Once we have that, I will send out to the members of that subcommittee the issue that the advisory committee would like to bring before the joint subcommittee. Get your feedback on that. Probably involve Karen Masita, who I will tell you right now, thank goodness for Karen Masita with the advisory committee, that she'd like to have considered. I think it's a very reasonable request that we could talk about that and then try to schedule a joint subcommittee meeting. Probably be September. August is a hard month to do that. So at your pleasure, Mr. President, as to who you would like the members to be. It does have to be 4 board members, so.
Mr. Minton, are you still comfortable serving?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Day?
Yes.
Mr. Mixon?
Yes, sir.
And I will too, so we'll keep the same committee.
All right, very good. I appreciate that. I will be in touch with each of you. I think we'll probably have a conference call with us and Karen
Okay.
to talk about that, and then look to set up a meeting. Financial report, I think we got time.
Yeah.
You wanna pile on? Is Gail in here? No. You go, Greg. Yeah, Josh, you wanna go ahead and do
Yeah.
the investigative report while you're sitting here?
All right, well, behind the tab there in your folders, you can see the investigations. To date so far, things are moving right along. We're still, running about where we normally do for complaints. The procedural legal ones still, the errors are the front runner as usual, followed by procedural legal and then diversion. And the surrenders, I'm not sure that total has changed from last month. We're still at, I believe we're still at 20, 11 techs, 6 pharmacists, and 3 pharmacies. There may be some that are coming down the road pretty soon though. So,
Have a care for Josh and Cindy, who have a crap pile of data to crunch for this PED survey. So I appreciate them, what they're doing.
Any questions for Josh? I did have an interesting thing happen this past week at our site. We had a young man come in to purchase syringes. And of course, after a few questions, we determined that he was not a user in a legitimate sense. And he stood there and stood us down saying it was, he could not be refused by a pharmacy to sell him syringes. Of course, he was kindly escorted out after a few minutes of conversation.
The gentleman who did not appear for the meeting in June to discuss that issue is coming back in September to talk about that. He's passionate about that issue. The law is you don't have to have a prescription to purchase a syringe in North Carolina, but the law doesn't require you. It's up to you to set your policy about how to do it. But that's interesting. That's coming up.
So if you get a complaint, just give me a call.
that's quite the,
do you know who you're messing with?
that's quite the line in the sand to draw.
Thank you, Josh.
Yep.
Ms. Gale?
Okay, under your first financial tab is the memo to Mr. Campbell with a brief summary of our June activity that I'm gonna discuss now. The next report is our balance sheet, and line 6, our total cash is $6.9 million at June 30th, 9 months into our fiscal year. Line 44, our excess revenues over expenditures is $1.27 million. Line 45, our total fund balance, $8.5 million. And line 30 and 47, our total assets and total liabilities and fund balance is $8.67 million. The next report is our profit and loss statement for June 30th. Line 25, our total revenues is $3.76 million. Our budget to date is $3.65 million. That's a total year-to-date variance of $109,727, and then our annual budget is $3.8 million. Line 76, our total expenditures is $2.49 million. Our year-to-date budget is $2.6 million. That's a variance of $149,000 under budget, and our total annual budget for expenditures is $3.4 million. If you'll go to the revenues, we'll discuss our large variances. And if you'll look at line 6, our pharmacy permits is 98,000 over budget. And that's due to the transfer of ownerships of the, Carr and Walgreens and Harris Teeter and Kroger. But then you'll also notice that our pharmacy renewals, the line under that 7 is 43,400 under budget because they were transfers and didn't, renew. And then our other large variance is the device and DME permits, which is 23,500 over budget currently. And I think that's just, we under budgeted that line because the revenue had fallen in the prior fiscal year, but obviously it's picking up. Under our expenditures, our large variances are salaries, line 27, that's 46,444 under budget, but that's due to the change in personnel that we've had during the fiscal year. Line 31, salaries, vacation pay, 18,860. That was because we had no idea at the time when we did budget of who would be retiring and leaving. Also, the salaries overtime is over budget by 23,628, and then if you look at line 46, inspection expenses is over budget by 16,063, and that's due to the increased number of inspectors hired, as well as meeting the March 1st deadline to complete the extra investigations. So it looks like overall most of our line items are, on target with budget. Consulting and legal fees, they have large variances, but that's just due to the invoicing and and budgeting, and that should average out by the end of the fiscal year. So that's all for that. Also, please note, under the next tab is a designated fund balance. And you'll note that I adjusted the consulting budget line by 210,000, and that was from 392,900 to 182,900, and posted the $210,000 to fund balance IT services, which is line 42 on the balance sheet. And this is for the 3-year contract with Myricomp for the redesign of our software.
Everybody recalls we have this massive redesign going on.
Second year of that.
We are in the first year of it, and so we were showing this large budget for this year, and I mean, really always the intent was we'd set aside the money to pay that out over the next 3 years, and so Gail entirely appropriately wanted to adjust that so it didn't look like we had this enormous number sitting out there that was a fake number. So it moves it into a restricted fund balance to pay that out over the next couple of years. But we'd like to get your approval to make that change and designate that in a restricted fund balance for IT services. But that's what it is. It's not a new expenditure.
Do you just need acknowledgement on that, or do
I
you
go
need
ahead, if we could just get a motion to approve the.
Motion to approve.
Yeah.
Second?
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. It can be made that way, Jay.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Very good, very detailed. Thank you, Ms. Gale.
Thanks.
Thanks, Gail. Board members, that leaves then the consent agenda, and we do not have a need for a closed session today, so.
Has the board members had a chance to review the consent agenda, please? And if so, I need a motion.
I move it be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda is accepted. Any other business to come before the board?
I'd like to make a consideration, a point to consider. I think the board needs to think about adopting a policy in regards to pharmacist utilization of the controlled substance reporting system. I'd maybe do a little thinking about that and maybe gonna put a study group together, something like that. We need to move on that. If we don't, somebody's gonna tell us we should have.
Okay.
Perfectly fine with me. Y'all figure out, let me know how you wanna proceed on that. I would suggest you put together
Start the thought processes on it.
You wanna, have that as one of our points at the,
at the retreat.
at the retreat?
That's a great idea.
Have board members be thinking about that between now and then. We'll add that as far as one of our agenda items to discuss and come away with an action we need to take. Good?
Yes. I'm good with that, yeah.
Okay. All right.
That's a great suggestion. Put that on there.
Okay.
I will say, so it's on the record and recorded, I appreciate y'all doing your ethics catch up. The fault for that being late lies entirely with me and not with any of you. I found out you were late. I had called the Ethics Commission to ask Sue Lundberg, who I know, if she would like, I said, we're due for our ethics training at our retreat. Would you come and teach it for us? And she said, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. And Lily said, actually, you're past due. The mistake was mine. I'm not excusing it, but explaining it. I put a tickler on my calendar for when it's done, but I tracked all that back to the last time we had the complete training and forgotten that we had done the ethics stuff separately. Sue was entirely understanding, but it did create for you guys an inconvenience, sort of a short fire drill to get that done. But I have revised. Parker's going to finish up, and I'm going to deliver all of these to the Ethics Commission. They were completely professional and understanding. I said, none of you are in trouble. If there's trouble, it'll be to me, but I don't think that's going to happen. But you do have my apologies, but I did want it to be on a public notice that you guys are doing what you're supposed to do. I screwed it up.
You're doing a good job, Mr. President.
Any other business coming before the board today?
I don't have any more swords to fall on, so that will.
All right. Want to thank you all for coming. We'll have lunch probably in about 15 or 20 minutes. You're welcome to stay. It's always a pleasure to have you all as guests and see what's going on in our state. And at this time, I have a motion to adjourn.
Move.
All in favor? Aye. Motion adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Joey, I've got to go jump on an NABP executive committee conference call. But if anybody's got anything for me, that shouldn't take me.
Okay.
And I'll be done.
All right.
I'm good.